All right, everyone, welcome to KC Happy Hour, episode 91, live and in studio. Of course, my name's Andrew Clements, and tonight we have an MPG lockout of our show. We have Braden Eves, Chase Jones, Race Liberante, and we're going to get into a little bit of things here from Newcastle. This is the first of hopefully a couple of live shows we'll get to do this week going into the U.S. Pro Kart Series weekend that we're all here for. Over 280 pre-entries, which is super cool. Big numbers across the board with a pretty even spread. I think the smallest class is KA Masters. That's just shy of 20. Everything else looks good. X30 Juniors in the 20s. Pro Shifter just hit 20, so those guys get into their payday. X30 Senior around 35, and the KA classes are over the 50 marker, which means there should be some last chance qualifiers. All that racing, of course, gets underway starting with practice tomorrow, practice Friday, or practice and quali Friday, and then our live stream kicks on Saturday with all three heat races and then along with Sunday for the KC Premium members, LCQs, and main events. But tonight, a couple things. First of all, we'll go around the horn a little bit because there was 2024 news coming out each year. It seems like it comes out a little bit sooner than the previous year. We're talking about it now in June, and we're just at the halfway mark on the season. We're used to seeing this stuff later in the year, but the good part of it is for the most part all the series chatted with each other, and we touched on it last week. We were waiting on the SCUSA release. Their dates came out over the time we were gapped out. The Stars Championship Series, their dates came out. So to recap, for those of you that maybe didn't listen into the very end of last week's show, U.S. Pro Kart Series set their dates for 2024 and gave us insider info on the very first race. First race of the season, April 11th to the 14th. It's going back to Speed Sports Racing Park in Houston, Texas. I don't believe, from what we know, they're going to go anywhere into Florida next year. So that's backed things up, and that also opened the door for the SCUSA Winter Series to expand to 3 race weekends. So with SCUSA announcing their dates coming out, they haven't put any locations in yet. Everyone's just kind of waiting to get their contracts in. Obviously, you can guesstimate that we're going to hit AMR Homestead at least once, if not twice, for the SCUSA Winter Series with the deal set up there. Obviously, really good relations with MG Tires, IAME East and West, and all that. But 3 weekends, so that moves into the March date that USPKS had this last year. USPKS moves to around that Winter Nats date at Orlando from this year with that April date. And then the Stars season came out as well. They're going to kick off at the end of April, more of a Midwestern-based schedule, touching down into the Southeast and North Carolina, with dates confirmed at Trackhouse Motorplex in Mooresville, dates confirmed at Newcastle. So Trackhouse Motorplex is, I believe, going to host the finale of the Stars 2024 season. Newcastle will be round number 2. There's one triple stack in the year that we were chatting about at the beginning of the show. But without dates lined up, without everything knowing, now we're expanding another national race date on the year. 2023 was about adding a 5th round for PKS. 2024 adding a 3rd round for the SCUSA Winter Series. So, Race, you're the most chilled out, but I know you've got thoughts on everything that's been going on. So from what you hear, from what you think, I mean, knowing these dates this early in the year first and seeing them come out, what's your kind of instant thoughts?
Yeah, it's pretty nice that they're getting them out this early. Helps us plan going into next year already, which is nice. For us logistically, that can become a nightmare, especially when there's some back-to-back races. But overall, I'm just glad they got them out early, and I really just hope the dates are fine and all, but knowing what tracks we're going to so we can figure out the logistics is the next step, of course. So hopefully they get together on some of those triple headers, and maybe they're at the same venue at the same time. That'd be nice, for all of us teams for sure.
Chase, same thing. Anything else?
Yeah, I think just touching on what Ray said is logistically wise, having the dates earlier than later helps us plan, especially, during the off season when we go to reconfigure our program, the way we're going to propose everything to all of our, team members and all that. I think it definitely helps when that time comes when we go racing. It'll be a little bit different, more planning, but I think it's good the dates are out, and I haven't looked in enough to it yet to really understand it.
Braden?
I don't have much.
Yeah, show up and get it
It's a schedule like every year.
Yeah, I mean, again, like Ray said, there's a lot that's coming in now. As the industry's kind of evolved over the last few years, we're getting more races in the same regions, and regional series, from 20 years ago that were a lot more volunteer based, are sharing a lot of staff with the national race series. From timing and scoring to officials to tech people, down to a bunch of different regional programs, and even tuners and teams too, because now teams are more involved in the regional scene not, I don't think in a bad way. I think there's a lot more people that, than 20 years ago that want to go with teams regardless. The demand's there, and I don't think it's bad that a lot are doing that. But even like this year, talking like when, for example, a Route 66 Sprint Series date's on the same weekend as a Texas Sprint Series date, there's a lot of like shared tuners, coaches, data people, officials, and the same for, the region. Last week, we obviously were streaming over at the Ohio Sprint Series. There was a CKNA North date at Dowsman that took people. There was the Rotax Northeast at Pittsburgh. So it now, now that we're seeing the national guys kind of begrudgingly, I mean, I feel like it's getting better each year, but there's always competition. Set their dates, then hopefully it sets a standard and it kind of trickles down that the regional guys talk to, and they've got a lot of time to talk, because every track negotiation takes a month or so to get the price right, get the date right for the track to figure out. And the regional guys, I think that's the biggest benefit. It's a huge benefit for the teams for sure to logistically plan things out. But the last few years, the national guys have gotten together, but the regional stuff is still hit. And, hopefully there's a way for that all to figure out because they share so many, and then kind of like we were talking before the show, I mean, with so much national racing going on now, I mean, even this schedule, if you're an IAME only guy, you don't even touch rock stuff. You've now got another race date to go to. Stars is becoming now part of everybody's schedule. Mm-hmm. It pulls some of those guys away from the club, and I don't think that's a bad thing, personally.
No, I mean, not to some degree. There's definitely, there needs to be club guys that are local club champions. They need to move up to a Route 66 or a Stars level series. I wouldn't even know if I would say Stars much because Stars seems to be really creeping on the end of the national scene already. Adding the OKN this year, it's become there's a pro class there, always having a strong shifter number. So I would say those are the big three right now. Rock really, thrives in the winter. And in Florida and then Andy's deal in the West Coast is always really good. But even those are, I consider those regional because they stay in that region. That's really what they are. So as far as, national level competition, of course, but I'd say the big three lately have been the SCUSA Pro Tour, the USPKS schedule, and then Stars has really crept up on and even had some better numbers and, even the Pro Tour at times. So I think realistically, those club guys, they do need to move up eventually. They need to expand, especially if they're going to be any sort of race car driver eventually. You need to really stretch your legs and see what you got and go push yourself even further. So gets some of those guys out of the club stuff and into some other stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's good for the regional guys too because they can go through their schedules and they can try and not plan on top of that. The only thing that worries me is now that Ruber has it that the SCUSA stuff's really staying east next year. Is that a lot of racing in the Midwest for the regional stuff around here to, where do they fit in? I guess time will tell depending on, again, where the events are. But that'd be my only concern with so much racing in the Midwest. It's good for us based out of, Indiana. So.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I like about the triple stack stuff is it kind of puts an axe on the test weekends. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, like we had, I think we've had a couple double stacks this year between Stars, SCUSA, and USPKS. We haven't had a full triple stack like we've had at Newcastle in years past. And we're still seeing guys with, full like 4 or 5 week deals on the road because they did the test weekend the week before. So when you do back them up, you end up with just one test week going in. Yeah. Orlando only had 2 because PKS was backed right up into rock. So if you were going to test for one, you tested 2 weeks earlier. And then even then, by being at the same racetrack, people didn't come and really test again, on that gap week, which was nice. So, I mean, the testing's good for the tracks. But that's a whole other deal to get into with the stuff on it. What we wanted to talk about tonight, and I want to give a little disclaimer to everybody first. Obviously on this show, and our whole kind of premise of what we do is building the sport up, but also kind of building the top level of the sport to be attractive, whether or not cars racing is in your future, and it's something you want to be a part in. So race formats are super fun to talk about, and we've now have, again, a lot of series doing roughly similar stuff. Stars is a little bit different format. PKS is a little bit different format. SCUSA is a little different format. But overall, it's the same. It's sprint races. Stars is, 2 heats, a pre-final and a main. USPKS, 3 heats, a main with an LCQ if needed. And then SCUSA is a pre-final main both days. So there's a couple different ways to go with it, but it's been blanket all the same. And one idea that we've thrown around, even on our end going in, was taking that same race format and just kind of moving the headline classes to have their pre-final later in the day and run support class mains, like run all your support class pre-finals through, lunch break, support class main, KA senior or X30 pre-final, couple support class main, pro shifter pre-final, finish about 3 or 4 more support class mains, so it's still about an hour and a half gap to work on carts from the pre-final to the final. But for the fans that tune in for those classes, which there's about a 20% uptick in viewership on, the window for them to watch is shorter, which is the big thing that, every racing series is looking at. NASCAR did the stages because their races were so long. F1 keeps their stuff at 90 minutes, IndyCar roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours. So that 2 to 3 hour window is better than a 4 to 6 hour window of what we had, but that's minimal changes. And Braden, kicking it off to you, I know you've been excited about this episode, even talked about it last week, of some really off-the-wall stuff to do stuff different.
Yeah, I mean, it's big for me. Like, I love karting, and I come back to it. And having been in, Road to Indy and been in some of the more, higher level series, and just really, I mean, it's just different formats, right? And like one of the first things that I ever noticed when I went to cars is you have way less sessions and you have longer sessions, but overall less time on the weekend. And for me, like when you get up into the X30 Senior and you have those really, really stacked fields with guys coming over from Europe and all that, I always feel like we have way too much time during the weekend, like way too much practice. I really think that when we have less practice and basically more time to duke it out on track and racing and have longer races, generally I feel like I'm more confident that, if I do my job as a driver and I can get up to speed it quicker than everyone else, I think it sort of evens the playing field out between teams, engine builders, whatever. It leaves it a lot more in the hands of the driver.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not unheard of doing a different format for a different class. It's just unheard of, I feel like, in our sport a little bit. The first one kind of grazing that is Miami Grands by doing shootout races on Friday and Saturday for one specific class. But, even bringing up, for example, IndyCar doesn't do 2 or 3 sprint races, just like the ladder classes do. Sometimes they end up with, the ladder classes get a full test day plus 2 practice sessions. So it's fine to have, mini, micro, and even junior get more seat time because that's what those kids need at that level. But having the headline show be different and just fit the time schedule differently is something that's seen all across the board in racing. So, and mapping it out for you first, what does that weekend look like? A perfect weekend, if you could say, take everything else out, whatever that anyone else needs to make money on as a driver, what would you want it to look like?
As a driver, I think that you really want to make the X30 or whatever class it is, whatever this pro class is, I think you need to make sure that when it's on track, it's at a time where every single mechanic, every single driver, everyone has a window, whether they go up and watch it or not, has a window there where they have time to go up and watch it. So like even if it's like say we have less practices, it's like a free practice, have longer free practices and allow the drivers to do, maybe we don't do the whole thing full through, just like in cars, we come to the pits, whatever. I don't know if that would be something that we could do, but mainly when I get back into the racing structure, I think that you make it like last event of the day and hopefully longer duration. But kind of lump everything together. Like maybe it is still a 3-day show and it goes, normal per race weekends, but maybe it's Friday night where everyone else has already finished their day. Now there's, 20-minute practice and that's the first session on track for them. And I'm just bringing up ideas, obviously. This is kind of rough at the moment, but like maybe you have a 20-minute practice and hot pit where, the drivers can come in, maybe they do 2 sets of tires and practice. I don't know what it is, but 20-minute open session, you can come in, make changes. And then you have 15-minute break, and then you're right back into qualifying. And that is your first day. You have maybe 1 or 2 tests, and then a qualifying, and it's all condensed into a very small window. And then maybe the next day, you have, say, your sprint race, your F1 sprint race. That's kind of a newer thing, but that's essentially our final, right? It's normally 20 laps Generally, depending on the circuit, anywhere from like 20 to 23 minutes is sort of a full final. I always feel like the races aren't long enough when I'm in them. Like, I always feel like the longer the race goes on, the more you've sort of managed your pace throughout the race and the more you've managed your tires. Like, if you go out and set the world on fire in the first 5 laps and the race is only 15 laps, then it'll probably never bite you as hard as what you gained in the beginning. But when I have longer races in the past, it feels like, anything could happen on lap 1 of the pre-final or whatever it is. Anything can happen, and you can always make your way back up all the way through the field. So I think longer races, for one, maybe on Saturday, you might have a warm-up, whatever, but not much track time throughout the entire weekend. On Saturday, you have your normal, typical final length event, and that's going to be essentially what is now the pre-final. And then at the end of the weekend, you have a very, very, well, I don't know how long necessarily, but a longer race where you feel like even if you start last, you can end up on the podium no matter how tight the field is, no matter what. A race that's long enough to where tire pressures, you'll gain in the beginning, but you'll lose later on. It just evens out. And if you can manage your pace throughout the race and really manage your tires, it'll benefit you at the end of the race. That's what I think the big key thing is, to where when I've been able to sort of go from way back in the field and still able to win, it's always been because I have tons of laps to make my way forward.
And the same way, right, if it's longer, you would think in theory that, the extra battling to at the beginning, that's so like crazy, right? Like, you don't want to lose a single inch even if you're on low pressure. And there's going to be that always, but that desperation goes out the window the longer the races end up being, right? You don't worry if you make one wrong decision and go back a few spots because you've got 25, 30 laps to get back to it. And, going back to Robopong and some of the enduro races, we know that with standard fuel tanks, we can go up to 50 laps here at Newcastle,
right?
On a full tank. So you can go a while. At PKS, for example, we're already going a new set of tires for the main event, so we know the tires can last, and at the same point, it's still roughly the same amount of laps. It's still more laps, at a Pro Tour with a pre-final and a final together, just different heat cycles and split up. So you take out, you may, again, help with that driving standards problem that we have because, kids coming out of even those classes going into, cars right now are like, in this mindset of go off the bat. And even the USF 2000 races are meant to be 30 to 40 minute races. The F4 races are meant to be 30 to 40 minute races that are double the length of what they just ran. Mm-hmm. And the mindset's totally different, even just adding 10 to 15 minutes to a race, no?
Absolutely. It seems like in Orlando, we actually had longer races at USPKS. It was 26 laps, I think, on a little bit shorter track, but it was still a very long race. When we were watching them, I was like, wow, this is quite a bit longer. And I watched, like, the field go, the leaders spread apart, get blown back together, go, way wide again. Everyone's, like, sort of moving wherever. But ultimately, like, always, the guys that are sort of the strongest always end up working their way to the front in a race like that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that X30 main at Orlando is a perfect example. The top 3 were gone by 3 seconds the whole race. But, by them running hard at the beginning, none of them had any tire left because they still battled in the middle, whereas Duke Medjin and Morgado were chipping away, keeping manage of their stuff. And then with 5 to go, it was like lights out. And they ran them down from 3 seconds back, and none of them won. Duke Medjin ended up winning. Morgado nearly won. Should have got, I don't remember if he got second or not, but he almost won the race. But by the end of the 26 lapper, those guys that were midfield and, Norberg, if he didn't get into it with DeMello in that race, he would have been right with the 2 of them because he was working with them at the same point. Starting, didn't get a great start, didn't make up a lot of spots. At the end of lap 1 was 8th to 10th. And in some of the shorter races, that's a death sentence, unless you can account on just crazy battling like the Sunday final at Utah, But that Saturday final, if Norberg and Turney, if either one of them doesn't cycle out into first or second, by lap 3 or 4, whenever they got there, the other guys got it hands down, So, Chase, what do you think on the topic?
Man, I think the three of us sitting here all have some type of car experience, but everything that Braden said about like longer races and what that creates, I think are all good things. You look at everything like a sprint race. Um, Even the Formula One guys now, they're like, oh, the sprint races are terrible. We hate them. What happens? They're shorter races. They tear up a lot of things. Um, that's because, on lap one, you have to make the most out of those first 3 laps, and you have to risk it. And that's where I think karting now is it's not helping these drivers that are wanting to be in cars. I would say like develop themselves enough and learn enough to get to the next level. From my standpoint, for the little car experience that I do have now is they are long races, but the first 3 laps, everybody, they work hard to make a couple positions here and there, but at the end of the day, it comes down to how can you manage your tires and how can you make your car work the best throughout the long run. You're not trying to set the world on fire from lap 1 until, lap 15 or lap 20, and, have high risk for low reward. Like Braden said, the best driver at the end of a long race is always going to come out in front. Whether, for Arias, for an example, at Orlando, I think he fell back to 12th at one point. And, obviously us being Kart Republic supporters, I was like, yeah, race is done. But guess what happened? He sat back in the seat and ended up winning the race, caught the leaders, and won. Managed the tires, and it came down to him. That's what happened. He has car experience. He let the car come to him, and he didn't overwork the tires or anything like that. And, he prevailed on top. So I'm a big supporter of long races. I think it helps the kids and the drivers now go to the next step. I think time on track is another thing to where you have to look at limiting sessions. Obviously we spend a lot of time on the road, a lot of time practicing, everything like that. I'm a big proponent of what Braden had said before is, whatever the pro class is, those guys are pro for a reason. And I think, if you limit those sessions, you're really going to see guys that might not even be in the best equipment really be able to perform out of the gate and create better racing. There's a lot to it. I'm sure Race has more to say about it, but I think longer races and, less sessions for the pro guys, whatever the class is, like I said, is a good thing. I think every class is important. I think karting on any level is important, whether it's club or starting out or pro, where we're at this weekend is important. There's a place for everybody. So whatever is the best for the sport, I'm game for. But I'll hand it over to Race now.
Oh.
Now you get to talk. I know you've been waiting over there. You've been patient.
Yeah.
He's just building up on it.
Yeah, just building up.
What you got?
I mean, listen, like Miami Grands is, the first one when it popped off, it was a hit, right? So that was the first time we really saw a format like that where you came in, hot pit, did your thing, or not really hot pit, but you did your qualifying, quick turnaround pro show, right, that night. And honestly, like even, Chase and I still drive and we still want to race, even though we're team owners at this point in our lives, but we still have that dog in us, we still want to go out and fight it out with the guys. So, at some point, it'd even be nice if it, like Braden was saying, it was in the afternoon. If it's a pro show, I mean, realistically, give us 2 20-minute open sessions and let us, figure it out. Let us come in, make some changes, slap a set of stickers on it. We can get all that work done much quicker. There's no reason not to. And, let the best driver and let the best crew, piece their package together and go win. So if it was a little more, and honestly, I mean, Braden, I'd love to have him out of the suit and really coaching kids during the day and then be able to get in his suit and go do his job later in the evening. It would be a double whammy as a team owner. So, and I'm sure Raleigh would agree with Ryan and Danny and a couple other team owners that have their, their hot shots that are also coaching in the meantime. But, when I have a driver like Braden in the seat full time, I need him to focus on his job during the day, right? So he's really in tune with the classes he's running, and it'd be nice to push that towards the end of the day to where even honestly, like the whole crew could focus on our driver in that class. And, the only place you've ever seen that is the Miami Grands. And I've never seen in 24 years of go-kart racing other than the Supernats, really. And I haven't seen the fences lined like that for, a one-off race. So to put it in perspective, I just think, I think if, I do like the longer main event runs. I don't like that me being out of a go-kart for 7 or 8 months can hop in an X30 and go do 25 laps, no problem right now. If it was a 35 lap race, I would struggle. And I think that's how it should be in a pro class. And, when we talk about car racing, although there's plenty of guys that are going to make a living in this sport, or they're not going to cars, or whatever the case may be, that's all fine and dandy too. But realistically, like, this sport is meant to be the grassroots form into a career in motorsports for most people. This is where you're supposed to start. That's what we're supposed to be marketing, right? That's the job karting serves to the community. And then if we have guys that stay here and become pro kart drivers, then so be it. But serving that market, there's a lifetime of car racing that I've done that almost none of the racecraft really translated, other than learning how to race, right? But you get in a car race and nothing's rushed. Realistically, nothing is rushed. The first 2 laps, sure. And if you're up on the wheel, if you drove like you did in a go-kart in the first 2 laps in a car race, 1, you'd end up wrecked. 2, you'd be the madman in the class that nobody really had respect for. So the racecraft is much different. It's much more mellow. You are looking after your equipment much more. Of course, you're in much more expensive equipment, so you are managing that to begin with. But, these guys have a little bit more, Chase is new to the road course thing. He has a lot of midget and dirt experience, which are kind of more like sprint races where it's just up on the wheel the whole time. I have a little bit of a variety of everything. I've done a lot of asphalt circle track stuff, and those are 120, 150 lap races most of the time in a super late class or a pro class. And honestly, I never even turned it on till 25 to go. So the last 15, 20% of the race is when you actually start using your equipment. Mm-hmm. And you don't learn that in go-kart racing. So having that element to a pro class, I think there'd be a huge benefit to it. As tuners, it's much harder to some degree. I do think it evens out the equipment. There's plenty of, you can set your go-kart up or your race car up to come in on lap 1 through 5 and pray that you get a gap and you can maintain it when they start fighting for second. There's plenty of strategies that happen every weekend like that. There's other guys that, maybe they can rely on the driver or the power package or whatever it is that they got going for them, and they can start a little lower and chug towards the front, and with 10 to go, they got clean air and they set sail. So if you can mix those two together and really blend what's going to work, I think the races would be more tame in the beginning if they were a little longer. There is no reason to rush, really. And if you end up in a bad spot on the start, again, there's still no reason to rush. You got 30 more laps to make it to the front, or whatever the number would be. But condensing the pro schedule, I don't see being a problem, especially if they just had the last 2 hours of the day to do their job. If we stopped every other class at 3 o'clock and from 3 to 5 it was pro time, and they just did their jobs, whether that be 2 pro classes that are alternating, which is like most weekends, we have shifter in X30 or a shifter in OKN or whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. You alternate those 2 for that time frame. Realistically, the same teams are all in the pro classes, right? So the same crews are up there. You could somehow make it work, but switching it up a little bit, there's nothing wrong with switching it up. Again, Eric did it at the Miami Grands because he could, and it worked. So yeah, following suit with something like that, there's nothing wrong with.
Yeah, I want to say something too on that is, if that format were to change, right, is we have so many, up and coming kids, whether it's junior, micro, mini, even some of the younger senior guys that are just now getting their feet wet in KA, is, every single person that's in the tent, whether there's one pro guy, an X30 or a top guy in KA, those younger kids, if you look at longevity in the sport, those younger kids want to be where, let's say Braden, for instance, is running X30 Pro now. They want to be there at some point.
Yeah.
If that were to be an instance where the format does change, granted, those kids can't watch every session. We always promote that our drivers, if they're not doing anything, go watch racing. Mm-hmm. See it live, bring it back, do it on track. We do, the homework inside the trailer with our data and video. Great. But if they could be able to, go up and watch those pro sessions, whatever class, like I said, it is, that would make them strive to be at that level someday. And I think it would create longevity in the sport. Now you're talking about, 13, 14, 15-year-olds getting out of carts as soon as possible, straight to cars. But granted, are they ready for it? No, not everybody is. There's only a select few. But if they could run at that pro level and create, the driver, responsibility, capability, and everything like that, as where long races, how to maintain tires, how to make sure that you're developing to the cart, even though the cart might not be the greatest. If you could create that with a up-and-coming driver before they got to cars, I think you would see cars, like the Formula 4, USF, everything like that. I think you would see a bigger development out of carts than you do now, just because of how our format is. But yeah, I really do think that format and having the kids seeing that would help them want to grow to be in that area and then, be better at the next stage.
Yeah, and if I could just add something, I can think of so many benefits that could be named right off the bat if we had sort of a split schedule, because I know a lot of the costs coming in here, it's mechanic, tires, obviously there's some other costs there, but like a lot of the cost is in, your mechanic, whatever. If we had a split schedule, now we can have a mechanic. I could work on my own stuff during the day and also coach the guys that I'm working with. But then if, I can get my go-kart ready, whatever, all day, and then I can just have a mechanic come over. I know that's a lot of money right there. Mechanics aren't cheap. And, for, 4 or 5 days, whatever it is on the weekend, that knocks off a good amount of money right off the bat. And if, it's a pro class, you want to have teams that are giving rides to drivers. And there's so many ways, if you have a condensed weekend, less tires, less. Now I can make money during the day coaching. So many things like that. That would be just an immediate benefit from being separate from everything else.
I agree. I think, again, going off of Chase's point before too, right? I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think that we should try to fight it all. The reality that all the car series realizing that people are willing to spend the budget at a younger age to go into cars and have dropped their minimum ages, we can't control the inevitable. We're going to lose on the sexiness factor, and for some kids it does work even when they're not ready to get out of carts and they get into a car and it's a different dynamic and they excel by being able to blow money and run 3 to 4 seasons in the car, and eventually they figure it out. And not even to knock on anyone, but like Nolan Siegel in Indy Next, that kid was a Sonoma local, had run some regional stuff, I think had run some select pro tours in 100cc junior, and jumped out and did USF 2000, did some F4 stuff, and really hadn't made a name for himself. This year, this kid is leading the points by like 60 now in Indy Next. It's his rookie season in lights, isn't it?
Season.
Rookie season at 18. So it does work. So even, for sure, you're right that like some kids it's not ready, and sometimes they get lucky, and maybe he was ready, but he never ended up going up to the level of the highest in senior or even junior to prove himself and win. It's worked out. So instead of looking at it as do everything we can to keep them and find more ways to develop, I think it's just as much of make it attractive and somewhat cost sustainable to do both.
Yeah.
This year we're seeing that Max Taylor is doing both an X30 Junior and KA Junior now. It's still really expensive to do it at the level he's doing, but if let's say it stars OKN, all of a sudden the sessions, less sessions on the weekend, less tires, could even maybe work out a deal with a team to do coaching for some of the younger kids, and he comes out a little bit closer to net neutral by the end of a race weekend, it's a lot easier to justify. I mean, there's a lot of guys even still that are at Braden, at our age or a little younger, in the Road to Indy ranks, in the MX5 Cup ranks, that would love to come and do it. Nate Cicero was set to come and do some X30 stuff this year, still paying. But then he junked a car at St. Pete, was involved in a big wreck there, 40 grand, out the window. There went his karting budget. Said it to me right there at the race. So we need to do stuff that, in the adult classes is attractive for guys to continue to want to do and to come back and cost sustainable. And I think one of it, right, is going where, you could keep the entry fee the same, because I think,
nobody's complaining about the entry
I don't think
fee.
the entry fee is the problem, right?
No.
Like in the younger classes, I think if you cut sessions, you would run into that from parents saying, because parents in every other class except for X30 and except for shifter, people are dividing still, some are, entry fee by laps on track. And I don't think you have that at the highest level, and you shouldn't to begin with. You should be spending the money to race the best, period.
If you're coming here for seat time in a pro class, you're not a pro.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
If it was more, I'd love to have two Bradens out there. I'd love to alternate Chase or I out once in a while to have go have a stab at a pro class or whatever the case may be, right? Having that extra ability to do so because it doesn't stretch you thinner for whatever reason, or like Braden said, like if I could just take one of my best mechanics or two of my best mechanics and send them to the grid with Braden at from 3 to 5, it'd save us a couple $1,000s a weekend. So looking into any of those things, like you said, let's not fight against trying to hold people into karting. The reality is you can get in a legend car at 10 years old. It's just the reality, right? When I was a kid, you had to get a waiver to do it at 12. That's what I had to do. Yep. And that was like the youngest thing you could drive, real race car wise. And even then, that's, is it a real race car yet? We don't know. But, now Formula cars, there's kids getting in them at 12 and testing and getting their licenses and things like that. So it's inevitable. It is what it is. I think that's where we originally, if we want to go way back, I think that's where it originally got screwed up when you see these families with 12-year-olds spending the amount of money they were spending at one time in karting. Going over to the next step in the entry-level cars is about the same. At the top tier, you're paying quote-unquote retail, whatever it is, level of national-level karting, which is fine. I'm not here to complain about the money we spend, but could we condense that? Could we shift how we spend and how, what we do to make it more cost-effective for the customer to maybe stay a little bit longer? I think so. If we just adapted to what we got to maintain the people we have and understand that there's people that are just they're here for now and they're gone later. It's just the reality of this sport. I mean, it's racing in general.
Yeah.
So, and it happens in every form. But if you can keep the pro guys you have and build on that, all that comes from it being a little bit more either cost-effective, having a little set schedule a little different, and there's nothing wrong with adapting to that and adapting the sport to that mentality, for some reasons or another. And we can't, everybody wants to a lot of guys want to base things off of how Europe does it, and that it's not Europe at the end of the day. Like the pros their weights, half the seniors wouldn't make weight here in the States. It just wouldn't. We're either too big, we eat too much, we drink too much, whatever it may be. But we couldn't even make weight in 90% of their classes. So, altering what we do here for what we cater to, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that as long as it's, sustainable for the teams, sustainable for the drivers, the pros, and the customers. I think that's just how we keep growing on the sport, and keeping in mind, we talk a lot about what happens nationally, having that time. I think condensing the schedule in general, I know as a team, as team owners, with that hat on, sure, we make more money when it's a 5 or 6 day event, of course. But as a shop owner as well now, we lose money at that point. We're further away from the shop. We're not doing the random coaching events that we do, things like that. We're not at our brick and mortar, right?
Yeah.
It's not growing the sport, catering to the national scene. It's not growing it either. So finding that balance between either scheduling, and I don't necessarily mean scheduling through the year, but the timeline of the events, I think all of that could be either condensed in a way. I just don't know anybody here that complains about track time. I really don't. I would rather, the only complaint I hear about track time is the length of a main event sometimes. When you go to a certain race, most regional races are do this. They have 14 lap main events because they have 10 classes or whatever. And you're like, dude, that's not even a pre-final at a pro race, right? So the complaint's never, we have too many practice, or we don't have enough practice. It's always, the main's not long enough if there's a complaint on the schedule. You know what I mean? So they went to 3-lap qualifying. Nobody complained, right? It just is what it is. So you condense the schedule a little bit. You lengthen the main event so we get the track time. I think that works for the scheduling too. I think there's work to be done for sure.
I mean, to be fair, I do know of plenty of mini and junior parents and micro parents that complain about the 3-lap, but never a pro.
Yeah,
right.
right.
I mean, that's the one thing. And so,
and when you're even like, let's talk about national level competition to begin with. Like at a pro level, this is pro level even for a mini. I tell mini parents all the time. We got let's just say a B minus driver that's stepping it up into USPKS to get their feet wet. I try and reiterate, these are the top 50 kids in the nation. There's kids from around the world at times that come to these events. So if you want to really put it in perspective to be the top 50 kid, go play football and be the top 50 kid in the nation. You know what I mean? Of course, that's a much bigger sport, but being at the race where the top 50 is, you shouldn't, it's not as much of a development stage as it is you're showcasing what you've already learned. So you got to give and take in the juniors and stuff, and condensing their schedule, maybe not the best idea for sure, but the week before practice, getting here on Tuesdays, man, that stuff just, it dries everybody out.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I think is tough for especially outside of the top couple teams that are able to charge higher, because you're still having to pay a guy for another day and have it to do another day at hotel. So by the end of it all that you're elongating is a small marginal percentage on the rig moving, but you could just charge a slightly higher rate for less days and still end up a whole lot more profitable. Instead of doing, 500 a day to make 2,500 over 5 days, you could do 2,000 for 3 days, and the customer would come away. Well, I mean, it's a little bit less.
Maybe a set of tires or two less. They'd be 5 gallons of fuel less. They'd be 2 travel days that they could have been working. Right? Like there's a lot of pros to it, as well, other than your track time, really. But
yeah, and I don't want to get too off on that, because that, I think, to me rocks the boat a little bit, putting my industry hat on. The pro class is a little bit less, because if you make it more exclusive, everyone's still going to follow into those classes, and it doesn't upset the boat with the tires and the sponsor money that comes in from them, the tracks making their money, the series making their money. I mean, there's definitely stuff to be solved there, but at least in the pro class with only 30 guys, and you cut that down a little bit, trim about maybe the back 5 or 10 off, and you make it exclusive to get into it, it makes it where the teams are easier to run a guy, because it's so expensive to run a guy right now. But my question actually to you both as team owners that we get before we go to commercial here for our one and only break on the night is, we get pushback from time to time of focusing too much on those guys, because we don't have the bandwidth personally at where we're at to do the level of photo edits or video edits for every single class. We can do about 2 on a weekend. 3 was pushing it when we tried it at Stars Night Fight to do KA, OK, and KZ. Hey, it's almost like a parent. You're not giving love evenly to all the kids. So as a team owner, when you go into that weekend, if we did have, let's say, this change format that the pro guy ran at the end of the day, I mean, is that an obstacle at all for you guys as a team owner of having guys there?
I'll start off first, but I think, as far as an obstacle, like what I said beforehand, is there's always going to be some stage that you should be working towards, right? That does not mean that our program and our tent changes at all. I think where we're at now is very good. We're going to continue to get better. I think, whether it's the lower classes and not the pro, it's not going to change. But we would push for those kids to learn that this is where it's going to go, and that's where you should strive to be. Now, as far as what you said, with parents and the bandwidth and stuff like that, it's a learning process, but that's going to also be something that they have to cope with, that it's a place that you need to learn and grow with the sport and the driver to develop to get there. So that's what
I honestly think it alleviates a lot of my problems on the weekend. Of course, as a team owner, here's the balance, like in our shoes. You got a driver that, you help financially support at times, you help with equipment, whatever it may be, that's running up front. Right? And then you got little Timmy in development in K100 Junior, whatever it may be, right? Obviously, you got to cater to both of those in one way or another. If I didn't have to focus on X30 Senior and dialing that package in to be perfect, and I could spend those, minutes at moments.
Even seconds.
Mm-hmm. Seconds at times, right? My mindset at times. And I could focus that on the development side from 9 to 3. and from 3 to 5 I focus on my pro, my life would be easier.
And you have the data from the beginning of the day to focus on the pro. I do agree with that. I think it would alleviate.
I think that's the only complaint most times you get. Like the number one driver gets some attention, and realistically, what the customer at times doesn't see is, yeah, we're throwing stuff at the number one guy because he's not a variable, right? When the kid in development's a variable, I can't throw the kitchen sink at it if we're off, or if we're feeling like we have something in the works that could be better. I got to test it on the pro. Right, I got to test on the number one seed at that weekend, whoever that may be, whoever the fastest one is, to really see if we're going in the right direction or not. So but that's all they see at times, right? It's very hard to throughout a race day when you have 16, 20, however many, customers these people have, to be fully transparent like that and sit down and walk people through that process all the time. So if you could, not necessarily saying anything from X30 translates to K, because it really doesn't with a different tire compound, but understanding what the track's doing, understanding what things are doing when you're testing that stuff, what they see and what's actually going on at times are a little different. So that would honestly help put some of that stuff in perspective, right? Like if we got these kids in the K stuff, we're focused on MG Reds in the morning for, even just one little topic that's different between the two. And we have our time to really set our attention and our mindset on winning a pro class or competing in a pro class later on. I just don't think it would mix much better throughout our day. So I don't even think I would see a problem with that with anybody. I don't know. I really, now that we talk about it, honestly, the three of us all have different ideas on this stuff. We don't sit down and go, okay, guys, how could we fix karting today?
Yeah.
We don't have time for that. So these are all three organic ideas from the, individually. But just as we think about it more, I was kind of just going to chill back and kind of respond to what I thought was cool and not. But thinking about it more, it makes total sense to split that up, because everybody feels like they get their fair share when the day's done. Kart's ready for tomorrow. I mean, realistically, if a good mechanic takes them 30 minutes to prep the thing for the next day, if you don't have a catastrophic issue.
I mean, look at Vegas schedule, for instance. It creates long days for us because we're team owners. But if you look at the attentiveness of the crew that we have, you have half the schedule. Yes, it does suck for some people, but we had mechanics going from morning to afternoon, getting paid, working on both, whatever. But you also had our undivided attention not spread amongst 17 drivers. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people that way that were splitting that in half. And even splitting that in half went a long way for us and our drivers. And like I said, I think that would go the same way in a lot of tents.
Plus, I mean, going back to the pro format, I think hot pits, that's fucking pro.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's pro. That's what
like
pros do. Every
stuff.
form of pro racing ever, in anything, you come in and you make changes.
Strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
You have
part
a
of the
game
game.
plan going into the session, right?
Yeah,
It's not like for us when we do interviews before a lot of sessions, I try to tell our guys not to ask the strategy, because there is no strategy.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
You don't have anything. But if you had a strategy for a practice session, you'd cut the day, you'd give it 30 minutes. That would give TV time for some pre-show stuff, and that would give you guys time to have like an engineering style meeting of being like, all right, this session we're going to start on X setup, we're going to make this change, you're going to come in after this, and then you're going to go. And that's all of a sudden, again, getting more and more identical and parallel to the car world. So I want to get into more of it. We do have our commercial break, so we'll take this short little break, everyone. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about maybe solidifying kind of a rough draft plan from all four of us of what something like this could look like.
KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the Rock Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to Rock Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. Rock Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full Rock Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com. for the perfect vacation spot and a family fun weekend where a race breaks out? Look no further than Karting the Coast. Our 10-race schedule is already well underway, with stops at NOLA Motorsports Park in New Orleans and Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi, where our podium ceremonies are on the beach. We know how to have a good time and put on a good race, and all that we're missing is you. To find out more, visit kartingthecoast.info.
Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAMI and Vortex Rock engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jecco Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com.
Zandy.
Welcome back, guys. Again, that'll be our only commercial break for the night. We're going to keep going on this, so hopefully everyone's enjoying the conversation so far. Chase had to go to the little girl's room.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so we lost Chase for the moment. But back to where we were. So let's go back to the format a little bit, right? I think we've outlined that this could save a good amount of money for teams that I think, for most team owners in this business, right, everyone does it because they bleed it and they're addicted to it in a bad way, and we just can't get away at some point of how much we want to do it. And I think a lot of the guys want to run a pro, if they could. But it is a lot of money to field a guy in a weekend and to do it at the right level with two engines. How many sets of tires are you planning to go through this weekend, Braden?
We're going to go through,
7?
2 classes. So
just talk X30.
Yeah,
just talk the
five
soft
sets,
one. Only
sets.
5?
Yeah.
Just 3 through practice and then 2 for the race?
Yeah, we keep it a little thinner.
I think that's a little thinner
Yeah.
because I think some guys are going to go probably 6 to 7.
Yeah, most guys do.
They all just hurt themselves, though.
Well,
they're just throwing on,
that.
they're paying money for time in a practice session.
Yeah, I guess winning sessions is important for some.
But it's part of it at the end of the day. Nobody fielding a pro driver out of the team's pocket is making money on that pro driver.
Exactly.
Right? So that could be another conversation. Selling sponsorship for live stream, it's really important for your feedback on this stuff too. For the most part, it drives what drives the viewership. Now that we have this blessing that's come to this sport as live streaming these events, it's something that we didn't have for a long time. So, the next step I think for a lot of these either promoters, guys like yourself, teams like us, is capitalizing on a lot of that. And what makes that sexy for us to broadcast is ultimately, realistically, how we grow the sport in the long run. So,
yeah.
If that format looks like you said, a condensed schedule where there's, you got to get live pit reporter while during hot laps, Braden's got his helmet off, or we're slamming 100%. An axle in it or something.
100%.
There's a lot to that, and honestly, I like the intensity. I think that creates an intensity level that's unmatched from race to race. You go to the Miami Grands is again the only example we have. But you go to that event, and it's intense when you show up for that shootout.
It's stressful.
We prepared for about a week to just be prepared for that hot pit, or not really hot pit, but that little bit of
downtime to make adjustments on a track you don't know.
There's a lot of practice and preparation, and that really, I think it shows the organization that you build. We can all compare haulers and tent sizes and whatever, but realistically, like what you build as a team to go doing something like that, I think shows more about your talents and your abilities and your bandwidth as a team and a driver package.
Yeah, I think it shows. Sorry, Xander, but I think it shows really what you're working on behind the scenes. Like what Ray said is how you perform. Within the tent, at the shop, what you're preparing for, and what your game plan is going into something like that, is really what truly showcases what your team is all about. Anybody can show up to a race and slap something together, but when it comes to like a true panic mode and a time set schedule for like 10-20 minutes, the way that person and that team operates is really what truly showcases what that program is about. which I think is really cool in any form of racing, and that's how it is from any. It doesn't really happen in karting, but when they make that next step, like hot pits and stuff like Braden was talking about, and on forward to IndyCar and anything else is how it goes.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, I fully agree. Thinking about it out loud, I mean, it's probably the best showcase of a talented
Why did nobody
team.
else think about this?
It's a good question. Well,
Why are we doing it?
I mean, no one's doing weekly podcasts like this. So to be fair, but I mean, this, you have to, I mean, we've grounded around a lot to kind of get to ideas like this, but, the nice thing is, again, when we started, we had a belief that, there were classes based on what you can see at the track that people want to watch more than others. You can look at the grandstands and you can see when X30 was in its prime, and now that I feel like it's back in its prime again, when Shifter was in its prime, and now that it's kind of on its way back, those classes fill the grandstands more than any other division, right? So then you have this belief that, all right, if we capitalize on that, especially that there's already guys getting funded to run that are basically pros, whether they're getting paid or at least sponsored fully for free, so they're making, putting in $5 to $10 grand a weekend from some manufacturer or a race team. You already have that piece working for you. If you could bring in, the personality side that F1, the NBA, the NFL do a phenomenal job at doing, the MLB's working on it, the MLS is working on it, of what's made sports go in the modern era, then you have something that people would want to watch even more. And we started to see that over the course of the first year, that, by doing Happy Hour, by having Braden, by having Norberg, by having these guys do a lot more airtime, a lot more interviews, a lot more extra press. I even heard it from a buddy of mine's girlfriend who races KA, and he was like, yeah, my girlfriend would watch my racing and didn't really know anything about karting getting in. And after paying attention to you guys, now she goes and she watches X30 too.
Right.
Never did before. Right? So it was like, all right, we thought we had something. And then by the end of last year and now in this year, as the numbers have steadily gone up on viewership, you start to see more trends. When they're small, it's a lot harder to decide if that sample size is right. Mm-hmm. For example, in every race this year that's had X30, so talking specifically SCUSA and USPKS, every race that has had SCUSA, that has had X30 Senior and Shifter. X30 is still out punching Shifter minimally. Even Supernats was the best one because we had it at one point. We peaked around 2,600 accounts watching the live, and we had about 16,000 unique tune-in through the day. There's a 20 to 25% uptick in that small 20-minute window that watched that race, and then they tune back off.
This is X30.
X30. Shifter was right there at Supernats as well. It's a little bit behind on the national stuff, but it's still the second one.
Right.
The thing about that is going in on and dialing in on that, no different than how we kind of talk about SCUSA, the rumor going east for the national stuff, is just kind of doubling down on your strengths a little bit. Us doubling down on that brings the entire wave up. So we're last year, peak any minute viewership, which there's 3 metrics. There's total views on a day. If you click on it 3 times, that's 3 views. There's total unique viewers. That means if you click 3 times, you're still once. And there's peak any minute viewership. That's the amount of people watching at this second. Mm-hmm. That's the number you see on your screen. Peak any minute viewership was 4th highest all time for us Sunday at Utah. Peaked about 750 during the X30 main. Was around 650 for the KA classes. Rewind a year, the X30 stuff was peaking at 330, 350, and the KA and the Mini and the Micro were 250 to 300. So by doubling in on our strongest divisions,
it's doubled.
Everything's up.
Right.
Right?
Well, you've created fans. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly. That's the whole idea. And then those guys stumble upon the other classes, and they're like, oh, this is good racing too. But, they first come in off of the most sexy product that you can offer. And where we run into the problem, right, is we just don't have enough time to do a good job on TV promoting that class. We have to do a split screen because by the time they get out of scales, and even if we did stuff into scales, it's a 2 to 3 minute turnaround. The next session's going. Mm-hmm. We've been lucky enough this year by having that data from the end of last year from Supernats and from the Winter Series stuff that now series are starting to believe us when we say, hey, you should double in a little bit on this. Give us 5 minutes before the main event and we can do a grid walk. Give us 5 minutes at the end. Let me go in the scale lines, hold up tech 5 minutes, and we'll go interview right after the races. And we're able to do a little more. But, there's not a whole lot we could do during the race interviews. We've tried it a little bit during heats or mains, and it's really cool to go down to a team owner or mechanic on the fence and interview them and say, hey, what's going on? Again, there's no strategy, so you don't get a whole lot out of them. But, having a 20, 25-minute open practice you can get all that action, because going back to the Miami Grands, that TV viewership is phenomenal when you have the mobile camera showing everybody working on the carts. You don't get to see that on most of our broadcasts. Our range right now, with where we set up, we just can't get into the tents. And even then, when do you go in the tent? You don't know. Every tent's closed off. Are they working on the cart right now? They might have worked on it 2 hours ago. They might be working on it in an hour. You might walk over there when you think you have time to work on it. You don't know. Everyone's working at different schedules throughout the day too. So for me, perfect format would be that open practice, because you do get that hot pit stuff. I think that would be sick. I think putting it at the end of the day where we have a dedicated time window opens up a whole range of options. Again, like we were talking before the show, the tighter, F1, 90 minutes. IndyCar, 90 minutes to 2 hours. NASCAR was 4 hours, 3 hours. They've broken stages for a reason, to try and make it where you can tune in, tune out, tune in, tune out, and then go and watch the last stage, or just go and watch the last stage. So 3 hours being the maximum, even on Supercross with heats and mains, is still a 3 hour window. That's the max we can probably retain a viewer. We can't retain, our growth is going to be limited. We're going to hit a plateau at some point, or get closer to it, with these 8 to 12 hour streams. Yeah. But if we have one stream, let's say, friends and family are the ones watching the support classes, that could go behind the paywall fully. And then the pro classes could be the ones free. Or even then, you could still put some of the pro class sessions behind the wall. You could try and make more money, put the main behind the wall. Or to me, my bleeding heart for the sport would rather just do it like Peacock and NBC with IndyCar and put the practices behind it. Either way, you can make a better show. You have time to do pre-race now. You have some time during the session to do more interviews. And that's the thing that makes us go. It's that putting a face behind a helmet is the ultimate key. And it's so tough to do that with the format now. So from a TV point of view and for growth point of view, longer sessions with the gaps and with you guys working out in the open, you open a whole wide range of options and opportunities. So I think 2 free practices at 20 minutes is amazing. I think you could even you could still do a sprint race and call it a heat and have it line up the main, and then that'd be your second set of tires, and you could allot, 4, maybe even still allot 5. But if you wanted, because maybe you want to have a tire change during a practice, but I don't think you need it, because if the race is going to be long enough, you may want to do a couple scuff runs or something. But 2 practices, a qualifying session, you could even just make a qualifying day with groups, Yeah,
you do a 20-minute, I wouldn't even call it, it wouldn't be happy hour at that point, but a 20-minute hot pit, and that's probably when you would throw on that midway set of tires to prep yourself right before quali. But you do something like that. Maybe it's 3 practices, right? Friday is 2 20-minute sessions at the end of the day, and it's realistically the last hour of the schedule. Same thing on Saturday with a practice and another, or whatever, a qualifying, and then elongated heat race and a long main event, to wrap out the weekend. But condensing that to whatever that looks like in the window that these promoters have is kind of up to them. But just moving that to the afternoon. The more we think about it, I'm like, man, how has this not been done yet? Because it just makes so much more sense.
And by cutting the track time, it just gives us so many more options. I would love to do a 30-minute pre-race. There's a reason TV does that.
And you could.
We could. The reason TV does that, right, it's no different than why we put a 5-minute counter when we go live here. You want people to start tuning in. And from social media, where we stream on especially, the more people that tune in, the more that video gets recommended on YouTube or recommended on Facebook, and the more guys slowly pop in. So you need to have some build-up time. If you just instantly go live and it's drop of the green, you're not going to peak as good. It's going to take a while to build that number up. But by having that pre-race, or in the case of how it is right now, having races, and we're basically treating, when we get like at Utah, we have 5 masters on track. We did interviews nearly the entire way. I would have loved, a little bit scared to just cut their whole race off of TV, because at the end it's a little unfair. We do interviews there, and you could see the numbers slowly climbing up with about 5 laps to go. And people could see the countdown timer basically going. So you could do a pre-race to build the numbers up. You could do a post-race that would have the time. We're strapped on lap time or track time. And taking one class out, you get back at minimum an hour to an hour 15 a day, typically. You look at Saturday this weekend, it's going to run 8 a.m. to 6:30. Right. It's going to be a long day. So it still would be a little tight with how things are now. You might need to tweak things a little. But as long as the pro guys ran less sessions in total, you would have still that hour and a half window to work in, and we could do 2 sessions in an hour and a half, and I think it'd be a fine show. And then you would just have your main event on Sunday, and you would be able to do a 30-minute pre-race, and you'd be able to do a 30-minute post-race and go and interview everybody, because we can't even interview everybody. Like, part of the idea of fleshing out the personalities that F1 does so good because they have a smaller grid is they're able to do a press release, an interview, a quote post, a story about some guy's race from 1st to 20th. NASCAR, their struggle is they've got 40 guys. You don't have enough, it's hard for the fans to learn that many, and it's hard to cover all those guys throughout a race. The 20 guys in F1, they can tell you the strategy during the whole race. But like NASCAR races, you watch the broadcast, they don't know exactly what strategy everybody's on. It's too many to keep up with, and too much going on. So, shit. I was going somewhere with that, and I got a little bit sidetracked. But, oh, no, I remember. So, I mean, the big thing is, like, by being such a short session, we're interviewing the top 3.
Right.
Maybe 1 or 2 other guys.
Minimum.
I'd much rather interview 20 people before and after and give all those drivers a spotlight going in, because, again, Oliver Hodgson, I mean, that guy's story, I wish I would have been able to tell it better throughout the year. That guy is a badass dude, right?
Right.
And they have been working their ass off for about 2 to 3 years in the limited schedule they've done. And we go back here a year ago, you and him, 15th, 17th. I tried to get him in our YouTube videos at the end of the day. But we had no time to talk to you guys. We just couldn't allot it because we'd be taken away from a top 3 guy during the broadcast. But to have that build up and then have him win at Utah, more people will be on board. But when a random guy wins, it's like, well, I didn't know I should have been rooting for that guy because I didn't know he was an underdog. I didn't have a reason. I didn't
You
know
don't
him.
know his story. You know nothing about the guy.
Yeah,
that's
and like when we get into when we involve the hot pit, that opens so many options up, right? Because anytime you're in the pits, whether it's like, especially when we're doing tires, right? At least in Road to Indy, we had to figure out where we're going to use our tires when, and maybe it's not that much of a decrease in the overall amount. But I think of one case straight off the bat. If you had 2 practice tires, okay, you could throw on a set to start, maybe throw on another one in session 2, but you would have 2 sets to where if it's a 20-minute session, you don't want to run the same set the whole time. So you come in, you have to change the tires, then you can interview the driver, you can get the quick tidbit there, and then also in quali, why don't we do two qualifying sets in 2 sets of tires in qualifying? Now we can do our first runs. Everyone has to go out, and obviously they'll want to time the second run to be getting their peak of the tire at the very end of the session if it's an open time thing. But now it becomes like Formula One quali, where you have this big long build up to it, and then at the very end of the qualifying, it's bang, bang, bang. Everyone goes quickest on the same lap, and nobody knows who's going to get it.
That is a good show at the end, and we kind of get that with this 3-lap quali at least, where things are limited, that we do get that run to the line. That's pretty cool. But having that longer one, a longer session from a TV side, I could go on Braden for his first run and follow him for a lap, and I could talk about him. I could go to Chase, and I would have that storytelling to build up, and then you'd have your build up of all those guys, and then you would get the clash at the end in that last run to the line, the last minute. No different than F1, right? It's a slow build and then the payoff. And it was the same formula for our original video series that we started, and this whole program started on, was we're going to go around and we're going to interview the whole field in an informal way so you get the personality out, and then we're going to do a 3-minute highlight reel to see how they clash, and we're going to have some interviews at the end to show the aftermath. That's all it is. You talk to one of my favorite quotes from one of the WWE documentaries was Triple H saying, we aren't even wrestling, we aren't even entertainment. What we are is we build up a superhero and a supervillain, and then they clash in the center. That's our product. That's what we do. And to me, that's the epitome of sports right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we could be racing shopping carts. It doesn't matter. If I hate race or if I love Braden, I want Braden to win, or I really want to watch Chase race lose.
Right.
And that's the secret.
It's the same deal in IndyCar, NASCAR, anything you watch. You know, there's always a
hero and a villain.
Yeah, you know, you look at Kyle Busch. There's a lot of Kyle Busch fans, but there's a lot of not Kyle Busch fans.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot of Dale Earnhardt fans or whatever, but it creates the intensity that people buy into to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can create the intensity, a lot more people are going to buy into what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the open, you know, practice sessions, the hot pits, that format will create that. You have more people that already got done running, buying in. You got people hanging on the fence. You got people buying in on the video. You have the stories that you're being able to tell about each driver as you're going about it. You have FaceTime, naming a face it creates that entire atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think what we got to see that was cool at Miami Grands with those shootouts is the whole paddock staying after. Not so much last year because it was a little bit cold, but in that first year, I mean, guys were done for 4 or 5 hours, and they did hang around and watched and hung out. And when we think from the in-person spectator side as well, right, like, I mean, here in Newcastle, the amount of people that camp out here is awesome. The tailgate culture here is heavily underrated. But, you know, to start, the first few people that aren't racing that are tailgating, like, they're not really going to have anyone to hang out with at the beginning. But if they did, and everyone else in the paddock is done for a few hours on the day, they're hanging out and, you know, partying a little bit with all the dads and all the moms and all the, you know, the kids hanging out as well from all the support classes watching the pros. And I also think that, like, it's just the one last thing that we need to get the sport to understand, because there's a little bit of snootiness from everybody thinking that their class is the best and their class matters the most, and, you know, they get it. But now we have numbers that can prove which one is. Damn it, dude.
You lost it again, dude.
Lost it again.
Dude, at the end of the day, this is like, racing's such a selfish sport. Like, you gotta, like, it's so easy to oh yeah, well, little Timmy's on track now. We're not talking about little Timmy running micro. Like, it's a selfish sport. We all want the best for ourselves at the end of the day. As a driver, you have to be that way. As a family in racing, you have to be that way. But, you know, at the end of the day, your job is to take numbers, clash those together, figure out where you produce the best numbers, and keep hitting that, because ultimately that makes more little Timmy show up to the track later. So if you can't buy into that as a consumer, then, like, you better start, because that's just the way the world works with television. And, you know, you guys, and obviously this isn't like on TV, but streaming this stuff, broadcasting stuff, it's all the same numbers. It's all the same formula. Nothing changes from what you do to what ESPN does. There's a lot less Detroit Lions games on than there are Cowboys games. There's still pro players, but the Cowboys have more fans. It just is what it is.
Yeah. I remember what I was going to say is they need to get used to being lower on the totem pole when there's a bigger class around, because when they go to cars, that's what the deal is.
It'd be like driving F4 and IndyCar there, and you're like, why am I not getting
Exactly, right? But we have to change that mindset in the sport, and I think it's slowly getting there, and now that there's numbers to prove it. Before that, there was nothing, right? At the most, you had someone, because most people, you know, it's very rare someone's here on a weekend and they get to actually see every race, and to the point that they would notice the difference in the crowd. I noticed it being an announcer, right? Or working at a series. That's a small number of people that actually got to witness what I got to witness, and part of what set my belief system on it. But yeah, I mean, at least those stuff is all established. So, like, when you go in and you race USF 2000, you're like, I get why I have to race at 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. because I'm around those guys. Those guys fill the seats. Those guys sell tickets. Those guys are the ones that draw the TV numbers. You're striving to be them, and it fuels the sport exactly what you're saying. And this is the other thing that I've been trying to drive home to anyone who will listen, is that even though, yes, I know we're heavier on the pro guys and on the senior stuff, and we don't do much with the mini, the micro, and the junior. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, a lot of you parents scare the hell out of me. I don't want to get sued if your kid gets bullied in the comment section, because that stuff happens even when I don't instigate it for senior drivers. And I've even had parents of senior drivers get a little bit upset with me. So that's dancing it, number one. But again, number two, exactly like what you guys said earlier. If you make that class more attractive, everyone under your tent wants to be there. And there already is that belief from the kids. All the kids look up to Braden when he runs, and they look up to both of you guys because you guys used to run, and when you do run, right? You have that in the tents already. It's just taking some egos out of it. And what I always say to everyone is, like, there is a very vocal minority in the sport, and there is a very silent majority. And sometimes we catch ourselves on all fronts listening way too often to the vocal minority. And, you know, those are the ones that are going to comment and whatnot. But as we're getting further and further in, I know you guys have some more thoughts. I want to encourage all you viewers back home as well. We do have your comments up on the screen, and we have a lot of you guys that are chatting in. And one point that was brought up, Trevor, can we scroll a little bit there? Let's go back and we'll read a little bit of what we have so far, because I think one of the first ones.
William Vincent's
Willie Vincent's in there.
Scroll it up, Trev.
There's a lot. All right, let's go back.
Firing off.
So Talalempua was a good one. Let's go down a little more further to Billy there. So charters. I think that is such an interesting concept for this type of deal because of how good it works in all the series that have adopted it, right? I mean, for you guys, right now Braden's around. Obviously, Braden, you're working on a Formula Car deal, hopefully to continue your IndyCar career. You have him now. If this changes for one series, let's say Stars, because those are the guys that have done, I think, the most out of the box stuff or whatever, next year. Charter opens up. All right, it's $1,000, $2,000, whatever the number is. You buy it, you own it, you use it for him to run next year. He moves on. You're too busy. You can't focus on it. For whatever reason, you don't have a driver the next year. You hold that charter. That thing increases value. Now you lease that out to someone that wants to go run that class. That investment in the beginning hooks you into wanting to fill that seat to make some extra money. You know, they still pay an entry fee. Sure, make them pay an entry fee, but they got to have a charter to go run too. And you can make it. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. The NASCAR system's different than the F1 one.
We gotta play into the benefits of what a charter system brings to the table. So, having that value for that seat in that pro class, it opens up opportunities for teams to find drivers, which is cool. Because, if you have that charter, and let's just say for some reason Ryan Norberg's not on the entry list for the weekend, and he's a free agent at the time, it opens up an opportunity for somebody that does own that charter to put a shoe in the seat, right? So there's some value from a team side of it, and it does give you a little bit more control, right? But it comes with a vested interest in that series and that program, right? Being able to help build that to strengthen the value of that charter. So, it'd all be in the details realistically. But it isn't a bad idea for a pro level. I mean, we're talking about making everything a little bit more pro for the pros. I think there's a lot of work to be done, and that's definitely a topic of discussion because that would create some level of intensity that right now we don't have because, we're not even – to be quite honest, there's 3 pro drivers sitting right here with you, and I've never felt valued at times as a pro driver. I know Braden in past experiences, and even maybe a little bit in this experience, right? Like we're not able to pay him to drive the go-kart. Yeah. He's still spending his money and time to come drive. You know what I mean? And as you become an adult, when you have to seek a real profession at some point to get paid, we haven't quite figured out how to optimize that in karting yet. So although we have lifers in karting and guys like, Braden, again, he's on a path somewhere else, hopefully, to a racing career that he's dreamt of, right, and wanted to do and been halfway there at this point. But you got guys like, I don't know where Joe Turney's going, but he's an older guy and he's a factory driver for a Kart Republic, and you got Ryan Norberg and the guys of this caliber that are clearly staying here to be pro go-kart drivers, but we haven't even figured out how to properly to help them be successful at that job, So I think the charter system, in a way, can essentially provide value to even a driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing as well with that is it restricts the number. I think that's the big thing about the charter is it makes it so that the grid will be full every single weekend, and the teams will be incentivized to, if they don't have, they are gonna need to fill those seats, whether they have if it's
or lease it.
Or lease it, either way. Or sell it to someone that wants to get in.
Correct. Why isn't there a waiting list? Like, I'm sure there's I don't know if there is, but I'm sure there's a waiting list for Formula One.
Yeah, there is.
I have to assume there is, right?
Yeah, and there's a waiting list for the charter, too. So, again, I mean, if you go into the weekend, and it's just free money on the table, right? It's going to be great for the guys that are believers at the very beginning and buy in. And then they're going to hold in, and then again, now you've got some equity as a team when you want to get out of the sport at any point, because right now there is none. I mean, there's very minimal. There's branding, sure, but at the end of the day, as you guys both know it, Race and Chase, you guys are the face of MPG. If MPG, for whatever reason, you wanted to sell at some point, now granted, you've got the shop at Whiteland, but let's just say it was just the team before. If you guys sell it to someone, those customers that were running with the team, they were running because of you guys and what you had built. Someone else comes in, that atmosphere could be very, very different. And the value of buying a team would just be the parts, just be the truck, it'd just be the tent.
It'd be the assets.
It'd be the assets. There's nothing else. Now you have another piece of tangible value when they want to bow out. And it may not even be if they bow out of the sport. They just may bow out of wanting to run pro
maybe
guys.
You just want to sell it.
That's fine. Maybe you just want to sell it. But you have something.
So from my standpoint is yes, that's great. I think that would be an idea for sure. But in order to make that valuable is you have to create the atmosphere, right? So whether you run the same program, it's not going – if there's charters, great. But with the program and the format and all that stuff, you're not still creating the atmosphere for those charters in that class or that pro class or the pro classes.
So you mean like providing some sort of value with it? Like
Yes.
clearly, yeah. Like
Yeah.
you start I get that. Like, oh, somebody comes out with a charter setup next year, and let's just say it is stars, and like, all right, guys, we're fielding. At this point, it's OKN, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right, but create the value and make like we were talking about before, make you work to get there. Like make us want you to be in that position. Right?
Yeah.
And with the program and the format that we're talking about, that would create the value, the face with the name, the story, everything. It would make it more valuable for everyone to buy into.
Yeah, I mean, it comes. Yeah, being in that, and that goes back. If it was chartered or whatever, then there'd be a whole reason for that series to also be incentivized to give that class extra coverage, right? Because
Right.
if you're a team and you're not in the chartered class, if you're not in the pro class, you're getting a fraction of the airtime. I mean, the
Exactly.
amount of interviews and the amount of coverage you'd get on that end, and then purse money. So, I think that's good. I feel like, as long as it stays profitable too at the end, to finish in the top 5 or 10 in points is key too. Because otherwise you could run into the problem of guys just paying whatever, and you end up with still pay drivers in it with the charter system.
well, that or you'll end up having teams drop out halfway through the season that aren't in the points, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like I mean, I think the reason Formula One is for what it is. Like if you're a Formula One team owner and if you're Williams, for example,
Yeah.
like that business would have been dead 10 years ago.
Yeah, but one position's $1 million or whatever.
Well, I mean, to the point is you still have the opportunity to score points, right?
Yeah.
Like later on. So like even down to the point system, like we can go off on tangents, but very quick on that. Like although there's points for grabs, but it gives people opportunity to move up through. And like you said, if you're in the top 10, and there's some sort of pro payback at that point, like that comes down to you being able to do your job, so the series can sell the sponsorship. And so the teams can sell the sponsorship to fund the whole thing, right? Like there's a lot that just all has to kind of form together to create such a badass structure that there's value in investing in that. Because 5 years down the road, of course there'll be value, right? But it seems like for this sport, for everybody to jump on board like right away, it's just got to be like bang in your face. This is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And which isn't a problem. I mean, but it just takes a bunch of minds to come together and formulate something that has it's well-rounded. And I feel like that's where, to be quite honest, I think the difference between even karting events and car events is they're much more well-rounded when you go to like an SRO or like an IndyCar race. Of course, it's pro. There's so much more money being revolved around it. But even like with what we've got, just making a package that, you can take everything you're doing right now, everything these pro series are doing right now with the packages that we have and the drivers we have and even the time frame we have on a race weekend, and you can. What is going on in these comments?
Billy's just getting accurate.
But I think that's all it takes is everybody piecing that together and being open and transparent about something like that, and it going to plan.
100%. I mean, I think. Wait, Braden, you had something to say. I don't want to interrupt you. Did you have something earlier? Or did you lose it?
We'll come back to that.
All right, now I'm not the only one losing.
Oh,
my train
I
of
was
thought.
gonna bring up the whole like championship prize money
Oh, yeah.
versus individual race
that's
money.
a
Yeah.
good one.
So yeah, right. I've posed this question. I was actually kind of surprised by the answer from Norberg and
the pond
Formal
talk.
because I asked them in Orlando. I was like, "You guys are getting $2,500 to win today, $2,500 to win tomorrow. Would it be better and easier for you guys to structure your deals if you took $1,000 to win on the day, and that $1,500 and that extra bit of the purse money went into the championship pool by the end of the season, and you're racing for $10,000 or $20,000 for a championship title?" And they said no. But to me, it's way easier because I think back of how drivers like Braden and you guys have been able to structure deals where it's a commission-based deal off of the prize money you bring in. You're not now like dead in the water if you have one bad weekend and you don't bring back money to the team because you might still be in the hunt to go get the points or to get the championship. So you get guys committed for the season. And going back onto what you're saying, race 2, it makes our job easier on the storytelling side, and it makes it easier on the series sponsorship selling side to know guys are committed for the year. I mean, there is a lot more even on the minimalist level. Like when it comes down to social media posts, we could probably double our output of different graphics of winners, podiums, whatever, if I had all 20 drivers for the season locked in and those graphics were pre-made. Right now, what we're doing, it takes us 20, 30 minutes after a race because it's a different grid every weekend. And what we have to do is we have to go in, have that pre-built, hopefully have that driver shot. Trevor, behind the camera, sometimes he has to go over and run and go take a picture of the guy while he's sweaty in the scales because we took a picture of 20 of the guys in the field out of the 30 we thought would win, and it's the one guy we didn't who just showed up this week, and we had to go get a picture of him. So it makes it a lot easier to market when you have guys locked in for the season, and I think it also makes it easier for teams to justify and deals to get structured to lock guys in for the year. And I think even from the series side, it makes sense to do that because now you've got guaranteed entries for the year. I mean, what series wouldn't kill, I feel like right now, to have a guaranteed grid of 20 or guaranteed grid of whatever number all 4 rounds. No matter what, your seats are full.
Yeah.
They can budget how many tires to bring, if they sell tires, how much oil to bring, how much fuel to bring, what their pit space looks like, how many staff they need to bring. I mean, it is a guesstimate in some series, especially at the regional level where the numbers go up and down a whole lot more. Do I need to call 5 more officials or call around? I get text all the time from series owners saying, hey, do you have more help? I need help at 2 weeks away.
Right.
So when you have those numbers locked in for the year, it's so much easier on a lot of other logistics too, including us from the marketing side and including the series side. I mean, we could do a proper media day on the first week of the year, and I would actually get use out of it.
Right.
We do like 7 media days a year, and we should be doing one damn near every weekend because everyone changes teams, changes classes, different guys come and go. Oh, I'm not racing. Now I'm racing. Euro guys come over
Well,
and
it
so
may
on.
even help lock a guy in mid, full season, like not the, there's plenty of ex-senior guys that right now that they change. I mean, dude, I'm thinking of one guy specifically.
There's 2 of them right now that have played musical chairs, ADT and Paulie.
I was going to say Paulie.
I know. Paulie takes it on the chin, but DeJulio's giving a run for his money. He's gone through 3
Yeah, he
this
is.
year. Parallel
Yeah.
Prime with
Be
Birrell
careful, you're
and
gonna
now
get
with
some
International.
stuff in the comments.
Well, I feel like
we'll get
that. Yeah,
some.
we're not hating on those guys because it has to happen sometimes. But at the same time, like you get, maybe that helps lock the dude in for the season and stay committed to your program because there's no worse feeling than having a guy you just either invested in or you've put a lot
Just
of
the time and planning
heart in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like committing to that guy and testing with that and like really putting the program together, like that's been my personal struggle with the sport for a long time is like, of course, coming from the car stuff, we've all learned what the proper program looks like.
Yeah.
And what the perfect program's supposed to look like and how you're supposed to execute. I mean, we got Billy Vincent practically runs Arrow McLaren. Like, we have the resources and the know-how to structure something the right way. We have a guy that does it every day for a living.
And not just him. I mean, in the paddock,
There's a lot of them. I'm just
you got
talking-
Greg Ives,
Yeah,
former
100%.
Alex Bowman crew chief, still did the Garage 56 program.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them.
Paul Wolf's kid, Cade Wolf running. I mean, you think, again,
Yep.
Kevin Harvick with Keelan.
Yep.
Keelan's supposed to, from what I understand, come back next year and run junior.
Yep.
So that means we'll have Kevin in the paddock again, and hopefully probably a lot more now that he's going to retire from the Cup Series. You have all these, brains. And then, again, we talk Billy. There's a ton of guys that still work in the industry back and forth, all the way down to the local level.
My struggle with it is none of that really, honestly, as much as you try and make all of it translate, it can't because of the scheduling, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Like putting those schedules together, with the drivers, let's talk about engine maintenance. We had a customer last week calling like, hey, we're in, right? Like, I don't have time to send your engine off now. You weren't in at the beginning of the year,
Yeah.
and now you are, right? Now we're on worn out. Like, so the
Deadlines for
structure,
everything, yeah.
it's really hard to dead set structure your stuff unless you have locked in terms, I guess, with some of your clientele at times, or even drivers, factory pilots or sponsored athletes, because they can come and go. So even locking that kind of stuff in and really just knowing your plan and being able to create a plan is something that I guess I've personally struggled with as now a team owner in the sport, really being able to detail that stuff out when there's so much variance.
Yeah, and from a media side too, right? Like, there is no way, even if we structured an event for fans to come out, that with the current format of being on track every hour and a half to 2 hours, that I could pull drivers and do an autograph or a meet and greet or do extra sponsor meetings or any kind of thing. It's impossible. There's no way to do that. If you're not on track till 3, granted, you'll be working in the data room and coaching, but I could pull you for an hour and you could probably work around that. And then again, by having those locked in guys, just like what I was saying on telling the stories of the season, knowing that we've got guys to work with the whole year, and going back on even the whole basis of what I said markets a sport is people. It's not the badass racing. The badass racing is an amazing bonus that we are blessed with.
Yeah, but there's got to be emotion behind it.
There's
There's got
emotion
to be
behind
something
it. So
behind it.
those 20 guys are going to lead the sport. And those are the guys that I'd want to bring in on a day early in the week and take them around to the local ice cream shops and restaurants and bars.
Well, we're about to do it at Pitt.
We're about to do it at Pitt, right? And thankfully, we've got guys that are running the full stars schedule. So we're doing exactly that at Pittsburgh. The charity race that we announced earlier today is taking the top OKN stars and top pro KZ stars drivers, and they're going to go and make some social media stuff for those of you that are fans of us online, as well as the Pit race local club drivers and the indoor karting drivers at Three Rivers Karting will get the opportunity to buy a slot to go and run a rental race. And again, like, that's not something out of the question at most of these tracks that have a rental fleet that we could do on the end of setup day.
Easy.
I mean, that's a huge no-brainer to, again, try and make up for lost revenue, because at least with one class, it doesn't fully rock the boat. Two, maybe a little bit in terms of the industry standard and what everyone's used to making money. And that's the one thing that is the other part that we get pushed back on. There's first that's emotion and ego of one kid, one class, getting more love over everybody else. And then the second is, well, everyone's gotten used to making X amount of money. So we try, at some point, you have to just stick to it and say someone's going to shock the system a little bit, for sure. But if you can mitigate that and still have growth, you just have more guys championing the cause. So
yeah, I would say it all ties together when we get into, when you can do your job and the sport can be marketed better, and we can find some outside funding to even push some of these pro classes and push these these sorts of things. I think a lot of it ties back to we're talking about prize money. The championship should definitely be more, but like in a perfect world, the real answer is the money that's being won already. Is it actually enough to justify the cost?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like,
It's
I think there
anything
needs to be. I don't mind what it pays right now. I really think it's fair for what people are investing and what they're doing to be here. But at the same time, that I think needs to maintain, and the end of the year stuff needs to be a wow factor, because I think it keeps people in the class for the season. If we don't have a charter system, right? So not relying on that idea right now. If you took the structure we have right now and you adapted a new schedule that fit the promotion much better, as well as the schedules like we've kind of talked about, when you have that needs a prize purse at the end of the year that's huge for the top 10. It keeps people entered. It keeps people fighting for something. You should take pride being top 10 in the nation.
Yeah.
There's pride in that. There's real fucking pride in that. We've all started from nothing. Everybody that's in that field started somewhere, and it was nowhere, right?
Yeah.
So taking pride in being top 10 in the nation in kart racing is a big deal. It should be a big deal, and I think it's not big enough. It's
not
really
big
not
enough.
big enough right now, because
Not
there's no
anywhere big
payback
enough.
for it, right?
Yeah.
And when we're funding Braden, right, and partially funding Braden's ride, right? That's all we want at the end of the day is that feel good as us, right? We may win one race this year, and we would be stoked on that, right? We may win two, we may win none, but if we finished in the top 10 in points in the biggest series in the country, and there was a solid payback for our efforts, we would be stoked and we would continue to do it. That makes a better show for you. That drives ratings through the roof. You sell more sponsorship. There's more money to throw around for pro athletes. It's just how it works.
Yeah, the consistency helps. And again, all right, talking on a payback, right, of how we get it done in the first year, because, yeah, we can throw I think everyone in this sport, sometimes in different conversations or another, we throw around the idea of outside corporate money as if it's that easy to get to. And not saying that it's impossible, but let's say that we don't have that option in year one. We're saving you guys, what would you say? If you're able to have Braden be the data guy full time and you don't need a second data guy by him being through the day and not having to have a mechanic, what would that number be on a weekend?
15 to 20 grand probably a year.
Okay, so let's take that and let's take 10 or per weekend. What would it be about per weekend?
$4,000.
Four
I'd say
grand, yeah,
three.
4 grand.
I'd say three.
Because I would be able to essentially do work throughout the day. I would get paid for that.
$3-4 grand.
Plus
3-4
minus
Well, that would
another
come out of
person.
my pocket, our pockets.
Okay, so that would come out. So
No,
whatever.
you'd save $2 to $4 grand depending
All
on your
right,
program.
So let's say the tires we could probably make them a little less, but assuming even taking tires out of the equation and making that cheaper, take the entry and double it.
Yeah.
Because you're saving on the mechanic, take half of the mechanic money you would have to pay and put it into a $1,000 weekend entry fee. And then the second half of that $500 is directly into the championship purse and the prize purse. And we could easily make it where the top 10 guys, I think, got back a good chunk.
My only
kind of costing pretty much half.
Yeah. My only argument to raising the entry, like, I don't believe in paying into a purse much. We already do. Right, it's part of it. Like, you look at it, a K entry's a little cheaper than an X30 entry because there's a purse, which is fine. Like, a little bit of it goes a long way, and that makes the purse that we have now, for the most part, on top of the sponsorship that I'm assuming these series have. But, if we're talking about creating something that has a more value to it when it comes to your branding and your marketing, as well as it comes down to the series, I think that should promote the figures that come in. I mean, the word. It's hard to say. We can get into this too, but like the word promoter is promoting, right? Promoting to the sponsors. Like, there's a lot to it that isn't always necessarily. It's been hard to do. Not to crap on any of the promoters that do this now. It's very hard to market karting. I mean, even us finding funding for our own go-karting seasons is super hard as adults, right? So getting a little bit of help goes a long way, but having that marketing value to get to that promotion level, I think that's what needs to start working together to raise that funding for the pro classes. I don't want it to come out of my pocket. It shouldn't have to at a pro level. Mm-hmm. It doesn't.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of starting it, but even not.
That would be a kickstart for sure. That would be something we'd have to buy into. But with a charter, now that makes sense. You want to sell your charters at the first year? We're going to sell them. It's going to go into the prize fund for this year. You have your charter now, and the opportunity that we're creating is to sell this in the future. It's a 5-year plan, right?
Yeah.
But there is no 5-year plans here.
Yeah. No, that's a good compromise. Is make the charter the buy-in that helps kickstart the purse, and then once you have that and you have the good product.
I'll spend $2,000 for the year for that for my charter.
Yeah, $2,000 for the year.
And if that guarantees that goes back into a prize pot for a pro class, and you have 20. I would think 20 is a little small because that'd be a boring 30-lap race. But 30, let's call it cap it at 30.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. No, cap it
at
$30.
$60,000 for your grand your. That's before any outside sponsorship, too.
Yeah. No,
60 G's, chilling.
That's a good base. That's a really good base. And it could pay deep enough, where at least some guys get a good amount back out of it. I had one more to add on. I'm trying to think of it, but I lost it. But
why don't you take a second and think about it?
Why don't you go?
Why don't we walk through? What are these comments?
We got a few more. So
Billy's been going crazy.
Billy's been getting a lot.
Brody Carts and Billy getting at it.
Yeah.
Got some more up there.
Let's see what we had. Sponsorship with the right broadcast. You have to have a good product that draws viewers. I think this is what these guys are talking about, thinking outside the box. I think the champ payout needs to be huge. Most of it should go to the team. I mean, that would be designated, right? That the championship purse would be first to the owner of the charter, and the charter owner would get to decide where it'd go. Then you would also take
that's up to your dealings with your team.
Yeah,
which is
you deal it with the team, but it shouldn't go directly to the driver. Like right now, the checks go directly to the drivers, so the teams have these kind of awkward conversations if they don't have it going in because they didn't plan on winning, and the driver walks away. But if it goes into the guy who entered him, the owner of the charter, then it flips the script. And you have your team owners happy.
Well, it could come down to who funded that program, too.
Yeah, that
right?
too. I mean, just set it up at the beginning.
It doesn't always have to be a paid driver or a sponsored athlete. There's plenty of customers out there that want to run at this level and have the means.
Xander, and we can talk about this, too, is let's talk about sponsorship for a minute.
Okay.
Something that karting has never had is a live broadcast, to whereas like professional series and something that we've all had at some point in our car careers or, dirt racing career or whatever has had. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's not something we have been able to leverage. Right. So from a sponsorship standpoint, obviously it's it's never just putting a logo on the side of a car or anything like that. It's a business to business deal. I can tell you right now, based off the drivers in our program and including myself, I've had sponsors that I had went away to come back just to foot the bill for the karting entry or what it costs to run a weekend because there's a broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, what you guys are doing is great. Creating the atmosphere is what we talked about before. Name and a face, who's sponsoring what, and utilizing the B2B sales is a big thing. There's a lot of people here with money. There's a lot of people with, on a budget. But the sponsors now are really, coming into the karting community. And I think that's a big thing for the sport, and it's something that karting hasn't had in a very long time. And I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't think anybody's figured out how to quite capitalize. I guess my overall point to any of this is nobody's figured out how to capitalize on what you've done, right, and what you guys have done. And between you, obviously EKN's been stepping it up lately too. Like all the media sources that we have in karting now is much bigger now, and as much as it does, it does some great things for, like he said, some opportunity on our end for sponsorship. But I also feel for what we've been discussing this last hour, and what you have, the struggles you have is you can't spotlight the master's class, the mini class, the this class, the that class, because if you don't have the time to promote the show, if you don't have the time to showcase, okay, for instance, if you did have that extra allotted time at the end of a day to really go over these people that help fund our programs, right? Like right now I see a comment in there, what's the ROI? What's the ROI to sponsor a karting team or whatever? Realistically, the only ROI I've been able to come up with for the sponsors that we have now, for the most part, is content. Content is easy to get right now because we have these live streams, we have these podcasts, we have our own social media content creators that work for us now, right? There's a lot that we've been investing in that we've been able to capitalize on, and the only ROI that I've been able to come up with for a sponsor that has helped fund our program or contributed product, whatever it may be, is content at this point, which is something we didn't have before other than our own personal socials.
Yeah.
But you being able to alter how you do things to get more personal time with people's product, the product that they, Braden is a product himself. He's a race car driver, right? He's a pro athlete.
Yeah.
He, to really understand those people's products, and really, not so much the sponsor's product, but like the package. You don't even have time to really focus on a package when it comes to
the interviews are too short right now, and they're too infrequent, and you could do a lot of different segments in it. In the pre-race show, you could do a 5-minute segment on a different guy every week, and you could focus on him, and that guy could secure it because he's going to be in the airtime, right? You don't know for certain. Right now, great. Like there's people that commit parents to running races because we're here, and there's sponsors, like you said, that a small amount, but a start. That are sponsored because the race is streamed, but it's not a guarantee of airtime. If you're in the chartered class when there's a limit of 30 guys, there's a much higher chance, or almost a damn near guarantee, that they're going to get airtime in it, and they're going to get a return on investment, which is key, right? And again, for us, we haven't hit it yet because we're still so new. Our year-to-year is up over 100% at nearly every single event. That's amazing, again, to be on viewership at the level that we're at. Whereas at this time last year, the daily viewership would be 6,000 to 8,000 at a USPKS, and now it's at 10 to 12. All right, phenomenal. We're getting up there where it's almost double over. It will pan out at some point because the streams are too long. And the generic fans, which is our next step, now that we've covered club guys, friends and family, a little bit more than that, the next step is the hardcore race fan. And speaking to, man, we have a good bit of coming in the chat here. I know you guys have been reading it. What have we seen so far? What sticks out?
They were all too shy in the beginning.
I see. Yeah, they're going off now.
Now they're all
target
jumping
audience
in.
of the sponsorship usually are already aware of what karting is, and that's true. Even like Tyler Lemp saying like most of the contributors are already in the sport or know about the sport, and that's true too. But that's what we've been able to cater to, and even back to that, like, okay, we're a dealer of Kart Republic. Like
the whole moto industry is funded by itself.
Exactly, it all is. Like they've created an industry around it, but they've marketed that industry so damn well. Because of it's been off-the-wall ideas. Like, you want to talk about rivals and villains? What about the Metal Militia and Travis Pastrana going off? Like, that was a rivalry, and that was bad. That was the kid in detention and the kid getting straight A's. Yeah. Like, there was no better rivalries that you see than stuff like that. But it takes, that mindset, I would say, like 99% in the same person made a different comment. 99% of the time, it doesn't bring anyone new into the sport. It hits a very select few people that can afford to run the national circuit. At this moment, you're absolutely correct. But that's not the conversation we're having. The conversation we're having isn't to cater to those people. The conversation we're having is to open the sport up to new eyes and new faces along the way, to then get them to call their local kart shop, Google their local kart track.
Yeah.
Do something to get the first step into the door. But you have to be able to build the emotion. You have to be able to build the foundation. You have to be able to build something that's share-worthy if you don't know what you're looking at.
It just comes down to, like, the same problem that we've had that Moto was able to figure out in the 70s and 80s with Supercross is egos to the side and let a select few lead. And but in this case, not even promoter, but speaking of drivers, everybody's in this in races, period, because they want to feel like a superstar. And if I'm a series promoter right now, with the way that my business model is set up, I'm pushing a guy like myself to talk about every single class because my job as the series promoter at the moment, for the way that we say promoter, series operator, whatever you want to call it, their main revenue is entry fees. So they want to make everyone that shows tire sales too.
Not here, but
they're supported. Either way, right? The tire sales is why we have more practice. The entry fees is why they want every class pushed the same and every kid loved the same because if everybody shows up in no matter what class and they feel special, they're going to keep coming back. That's a big key. We're different, right? Our job is our end user is not the driver. It's not their friends and family, right? Our whole goal is to have either people paying on a subscription to watch or people watching for free and advertisers paying to get in front of those people, right? So it's not about making you feel special. It's finding people that are special and pushing them to the forefront. And by having a pro class where those are designated and you've got 30 guys, it's easy. I mean, half the other reason why we don't do the other classes is no generic fan is going to know 200 drivers. We have 282 here this weekend. They cannot learn them all. Not only, even if I could tell this story, even if I put a post out every 2 minutes, you're not going to remember them all.
How many people know the names of every Cup driver that entered the last NASCAR race?
They don't, but they know all 20 in the F1 race.
100%.
Exactly. So that's the other half of it. But it's putting the egos in check and saying, look, this is driving the sport forward. As a mini dad, I love my kid. I love that he races. I love that we're on the stream. At the end of the day, the guys pulling the weight are the guys in X30 and the guys in Pro Shifter. And we're starting to see that shift, and now we're starting to see, at least, thankfully, the numbers to prove it to everyone that was a doubter before. But that's what
Billy, he says he's biting his lip.
yeah.
Oh, man.
But in terms of, all right, so back to the format. Final thoughts to kind of close it out, right? I think the charter and the championship prize pool, I think for sure from everything that we've outlined when it comes to prize money, even if you're not one of those guys where there's still that age-old belief that at some point, you know, it gets crazy on the last lap and people bonsai, which I don't think we've really seen, even though prize money racing's come up and has been around for about 10 years now in the U.S. consistently. I don't think we see that. But let's say you are and you put the money in the championship prize pool, you're going to get a more consistent field, probably a more guaranteed field through the season. It's going to make it easier on the teams logistically, easier on you logistically as a series, easy on me logistically to promote and market those drivers. On an event format, I think it's very simple from a 3-day deal. We have 2 20-minute practices at the end of the day Friday. I think you could do a longer qualifying session with a bigger build and a bigger post on Saturday, and I think you just do a 30-minute long race on Sunday. And if we're talking again in this specific weekend, with the way the sessions are throughout the day, we've only got an hour to hour and a half window per day by cutting the class out and doing its own sessions at the end. Still works fine. I've got time on the pre, I've got time on the post, the drivers are there for the whole day, and to me that's where, at the end of this 2-hour conversation that we've had, to me is one of my favorite podcasts we've ever done, by far. That's where I would leave it with the draft of what I would think that class would look like. And if you wanted to do 2, you could still do 2 and alternate them, and you just need to give me time. We don't have any dead time on the track, and I know that's alien and foreign to a lot of promoters to have dead track time when the sun's up or when the lights are on, but we need it for TV.
I mean, realistically,
need a little bit.
You change that up and you're actually like, you want to look at the session time, and that's fine. But the downtime, every session, there's a 5 to 8 minute window between sessions, right? Like every session, because there's cart retrievals, there's other things going on. Taking those sessions out, you're actually, you know, in a way, are you lengthening one and shortening another? Yes, but you're condensing even the downtime.
Yeah, which is another complaint that parents make right now, right? Like
there's too much downtime.
There's too much downtime. A bunch of parents have been saying that their days
crack a
quicker.
beer at 3 o'clock and get to the fences because we're going to work.
100%. I mean, you know, parents of mini and micro say that all the time, that their kids' attention span is, they can't keep them
My
occupied.
mini
when
dad
they're
had to
out.
build a bar trailer to keep himself occupied.
Well, that's different. Mike Giglio is a little bit of a different breed. Let me say that. Mike, I know you're watching. Mike's been wanting us to do a happy hour over there, and I'm a little bit scared. I'm a little bit
That
scared,
should
but I
have
would
to.
love to.
That
We
should be the
haven't
happy hour
been able to
spot.
make the tech work yet.
You should even invite
We'll
Jason
get it.
Birdsall.
We'll sponsor
I
the
mean, there's going to be a
generator.
lot of characters over there that I think very quickly
It turned into
will,
a different show.
will regret. They'll need to make sure that they're far away from what the mics reach, and the mics are noise canceling, and the guys that are by the bar trailer are only 1 or 2 deep like you
it
boys.
may have to be pre-recorded in that instance.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that the dead time is important to get that pre-race and that post-race stuff, and that stuff's heavily underlooked in our sport right now. But I think that's missing, the time window's missing, and the consistency of driver is missing from the media side. If all that's in, where the strategy from a driver's side is amazing, but speaking solely with my media hat on, I want more pre-race, I want more post-race. I want my marquee class that draws my most viewership in a tighter time window so people know when to tune in. And that's it. And I want the same drivers in the same teams for a season. And it would make my life 10 times easier, 1,000 times easier on everything that we do. So
Can't fix everything.
no. It won't fix it. It's not going to be perfect. It's still going to be a hell of a long day for all of us. We're still going to probably stream everything. But it would make things a lot easier for where we need to go to grow our viewership beyond the karting space. I think we've absolutely conquered the North American market to club guys that 2-3 years ago, when there was only press releases coming to races and they didn't have a buddy at the race to watch race monitor, and they didn't have a race come to their track, they didn't pay attention. And now in regions of the country I've never even set foot in and a national series has never gone to, guys tune, watch in, root for, root against. That's great.
Like firsthand experience. I just moved here to Indiana, and now that we have the shop at Whiteland, and never really spent time at Whiteland, right? But it's the first time in karting that I'm able to go somewhere new for me, right? Walk in, and there was positive reinforcement of you being there, and like people with a pre-existing notion of who you are and what you know, right? Like seeing it on a live stream and being able to, for somebody to be a fan of yours or really take pride in what you know and really follow you at that point because of what you guys have done. That's like the sport's just shifting. It's just sports in general are shifting, and if you don't shift with the shift, you're going to get left behind. And there was a small downtime realistically where even this was a little late to the game in comparison to either other forms of motorsports, right?
Oh, yeah.
So now that we have it, learning how to capitalize on it and shifting the program to really let you do your job to the best and us as a team to the best, now that the tides have just shifted. Most, growing up in the sport, everybody that had a kart team had a kart shop. They ran their kart shop during the week.
Yep.
Everybody stayed, for the most part, a little bit more regional, I would say, with maybe 5 to 8 events a year that were long, big travels. But you focused on your local business in your region, promoting your regional racing because it was word of mouth. It was, Go Racing magazine ads. It was whatever it was. But at the same time, now that that's all shifted to more of a team, it's more of a team-based sport, a traveling shop, if you will. And very few brick and mortar locations in regional areas, it's just all shifted now. So we don't have to prioritize certain things that we did before, the way our race formats work. We don't, we can shift that stuff. It's all okay because it's going to change with or without us.
Yeah. Braden, I know you've been quiet the last little bit.
Yeah,
We go longer than your normal bedtime with these shows, with this show tonight. Where do you end off? I said my end off of where I'd like to see the format. What would be perfect for me? 2 practices on Friday in that hour and a half window.
I agree with all that.
Quali, main, 30-minute main.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think it's fantastic. I think that we can dial it in later, but I think that this discussion needed to be put on a stage for everyone to see because, we've had these talks, and ultimately, if it wasn't, it seems like nobody ever wants to reinvent the wheel, and I get that. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, on the larger scale of it, the sky's the limit if we can actually build storylines behind the drivers and make it, sort of its own thing at a pro level. And I think the racing could be just absolutely phenomenal in the right spotlight, in the right time with the right drivers behind it all to really blow up. And, we've talked about obviously how, you want to make sort of karting a little bit more like Supercross.
I want it to have a
And-
level above where we're at. I want to clarify
Yeah.
that too for the fans at home.
Yeah.
That like where we are now, and Race, you get this as a guy who understands moto. This is like a fraction of Loretta Lynn's. Like we don't actually have a pro
yeah.
circuit,
Right.
right? We are amateur racing that runs 1 million classes. We're amateur nationals, but we don't actually have a pro level, right? And even then, in this hybrid format, we would kind of inch our way towards it. And then where I'd like to get to is where you had an event in a series in the right time of year, kind of almost SRX style, where it's at a point where you could snag IndyCar guys, you could snag sports car guys, do it in their off season, do it in temporary circuits, and you'd have enough of a fan following and enough B2B deals to sell suites that would include rental cart sessions that you wouldn't need to rely on the entry fee. But that's still a monumental shift to justify for teams to show up to that deal, because teams, their revenue model is on having paying customers in all the amateur classes right now. So this format inches us towards that idea, gives us time to build viewership, time to maybe experiment with stuff at the track of night concerts and inflatables and, vendor villages, while not rocking the boat too much where you guys would have to change your business model for this. Or, again, talk about how stacked the national calendar is right now. Something like that would only work if you did it in a certain part of the year, just like Supercross is for moto guys, and the rest of the year you were able to go back to working and coaching, and you only raced, and that was your branding in 3 months of the year, and 9 months of the year you actually made a living. That's further out. This is a much easier hybrid format that I don't think changes too much. I don't think it rocks the boat, but it does give me the opportunity on the media side to drum up more interest, drum up more TV numbers, and again, still do all those experimental things. I don't know what brings people to a racetrack on a sideshow, right? I mean, we think we know. We think we know the right genre of music, the right kind of bands, how big, how small, what kind of extra stuff in the vendor village food trucks, but we haven't ever tried it. So at this way, you're trying it without needing that revenue. But Chase, closing out, format, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, personally, it all comes down to, the generation's time and place. I think every business has to stay on top of the time, right? Everything around us is always evolving for the better, whether you like it or not. And wholeheartedly, like, what I think is, like, Kart Chaser is, 10 years behind. And that's just the hard truth about it.
I'll agree.
And, now we're, grateful to have that and to showcase that to what karting really is. But everybody's scared of change, even though the things in the past have worked. Everything can always be better, and everything is always evolving. And so anything that is open to change for the better, I'm open for it. I know a lot of people would either disagree or agree, but you have to stay on top of where we're at in today's age. And so if it creates a better atmosphere for karting in general, racing in general, I'm a big advocate for that. And that's really all I have to say is just, staying on top of the time and where we're at.
Race?
2 biggest karting races of the year don't have standardized formats.
What do you mean? You talking about Supernats and Grands?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just don't, right? So switching it up, there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously there's got to I think it's as simple as, these promoters, guys like you, I don't know if you could put a panel of team owners together because you'd have a bunch of mixed emotions and thoughts, but at the same time, coming together and really formulating a plan and then giving that to the community and letting it unfold that way. I think there's, a lot of times I find that I see that there's plans that are very short-term thought process that go into them in this sport. There's been times where I've had mentors of mine in this sport just always say, don't worry, it's a 4 or 5 year revolving door. What you do, what happens now in 4 years, nobody will remember other than the people that have been here their whole lives, right? Because it's true. It's somewhat revolving. So putting together, we can talk about this, but really formulating a plan that's going to stick with people and that's going to give them a cause over the next 3 to 5 years to really take what you were doing and what these promoters are already up to. Because, this whole conversation being said, they're all doing a great job. They're doing the best they can with what they've got. I can't even blame half of them anyways, because realistically, I mean, who's the youngest promoter? Joe Janowski? You know what I mean? Like, he's in his 40s, 50s. So and there's nobody young doing this, right? So they're just like, it's a customization thing, right? We've been racing like this forever, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it, but it's about, now that you've come in and done your thing and EKN's doing their thing a little different now, and they've evolved since you kind of came on the scene too. I think it needs a little bit of an evolution step. Look at Supercross. Supercross just morphed their whole thing with the World Motocross deal, and they've changed their format completely. And that's been a sport that has been fine for a long time. They saw a decrease. They saw a wave change in things happening.
Well, that and the WSX guys put that pressure on them too.
Part of it, right? But
fully agree.
From the behind the scenes, there's always pressure from some side. As a promoter, as you, there's always going to be pressure from some sides. Whether you have partners, whether you have deals with other guys, whether you have to be politically correct. It's just part of anything, right? Any industry. So, piecing all that together with those people and coming out with a long-term product that people would actually be vested into and that makes sense, like a lot of it just has to, at the end of the day, tie together and make sense. So good opening conversation for something to possibly change or evolve, but I think we're at a stage in the sport where evolution's a necessity, because it's not, we're talking about this on a pro level. My whole thought process behind in my head while we talk about this is how can we create something that's also going to benefit the local guy, right? Mm-hmm. In that show that they, the show that they go to, and something they strive to be, right? Without any heroes, there's no reason to even get involved. If you don't have an emotional attachment to this one way or another, there's no reason to do.
Well, and again, something to reach for. I mean, at the end of the day, at the national scene, when you stay in it too long, you can really think that the split percentage between kids on their way to cars and adults who buy go-karts for fun to race locally is more heavily weighted to kids. And there may be more dollars spent per person, but the majority of go-karts sold are a lot of 206 seniors and a lot of KA seniors.
It's the most. KA sells the most. 100%.
Yeah, and those guys, they get in, and it's like, well, why would I even go race something bigger? Maybe for the challenge. Now you all of a sudden have a sustainable form of racing with a huge spotlight, and there's something for those guys to want to reach toward. There's nothing saying why a 30-year-old who has the time and a little bit of money at the local level couldn't develop and go and prove themselves and go run in the national stuff and earn a license or get scouted to go on a charter and race. I mean, there's plenty of mid-30-year-old guys that run masters just because there's no time constraint, but Ben Cooper, Dave Serra, Andre Nicastro, mid to late 30s guys can still go out and rip and win at the highest level here because they're that badass.
Yeah.
It's not totally a sport for kids either. So for the local guy, there's something to be like, well, there is actually a level all the way up. They may not ever go, right? But there's at least that carrot to dangle at the top. Whereas right now it's like, I just go spend $10,000 and race for $2,500. And it's the same as any other class, and it's just more days off work. So I think making something, again, just for the kids here in the pits, but also for that local guy home, that there's something worth achieving to maybe one day get to be.
It just needs
to
answer the question why.
Exactly.
Yeah, and from a series side, I mean, we've touched on it at the very beginning of the show, but looping all the way back, it sounds like a lot of the same next year. We're going to run a lot of the same classes, potentially a lot of the same tracks, and a lot of similar formats. And at some point, we're going to be racing too much. I feel like, again, everyone can say we're racing too much because we're at the point of the year where everybody's burnt out. Don't get me wrong. But someone does something different, innovates, that's the one way to change it, because there's minimal differences right now, series to series. One guy that goes off on a leap, he might win, he might lose.
You can come to the same track and change the format up, and it changes the atmosphere of the event. I mean, realistically, like, look, we go to Newcastle a lot. Or not, Newcastle and GoPro. Those are like two tracks we go to a lot. Everybody in the East Coast pretty much goes there a lot. Miami Grands changes their setup up, and now everybody wants to go because it's cool. Mm-hmm. You can do the same thing at a track like Newcastle. There's plenty of opportunity here for change and things to happen, we're in God's country. You can kind of do whatever you want, right? So,
yeah.
Just
Trevor, what was that comment? Sorry, what was that comment from Bryce Frank a little bit higher up? Top 5 classes. Make it on drivers, 5 drivers per team with 5 teams max.
Absolutely not.
Oh, never mind. I don't think you have to do a cap on drivers per team, though.
No,
I think if you put a cap on drivers per team,
that'd price it out of the market.
That would make karting irrelevant.
Yeah, I don't think you need team caps.
I think if you had two, like capped it at 2 per team, like we don't need.
Are we talking about for the
no,
pro
he's
class?
For the-
or-
I think he was talking 5.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
5
someone was
drivers-
confused at
5
the
drivers
5
per
premier
team and
classes.
Five. It seemed.
I'm confused.
Oh, that's for the pro class.
5 teams.
Yeah,
All right, that
5
was for the
teams
pro.
with 5
No,
drivers.
go back
Yeah,
down,
way-
Trev.
Yeah, way
No.
too much.
Yeah. Could a team make it on 5 drivers per team with 5 teams max in the field? So that's
it's
talking
fine.
at 1 pro class, but then
Okay.
scroll back down. Top 5 premier classes. Now I'm confused.
Yeah.
Bryce, if you're still watching, we'll give you a moment here to send it off. But Race, I interrupted your last thought a little bit. Let's see if there's anything else. I think. Yeah, we'll just wait on that, Trevor. See if we get any more input on the last bit of it. But
Yeah, I mean, also like just one thing to add on though, when we're talking about like how this could like benefit, what would the benefit be right now? -1 mechanic, I would be able to work. Then also on top of that,
Now you lost it.
oh my
Dude,
God,
All right.
come on.
On
In
top
theory-
of that, you bring
in
guys
theory-
like me, Race, and
it'll come back in
other
a second.
you
older
bring
guys
more guys to be able to do
to
it
be able to do it.
Well, dude,
because
they
the
were
older
only-
guys got to
yeah.
make money, right? Even if they're taking time off from work, they got
Even
enough
that too,
bills.
though. Like we're all competitive at the end of the day. Like me and Race would love to.
Dude,
be
every
racing
weekend
this
we look at
weekend.
each other and we're like,
Why
man,
aren't
we
we
should have
racing?
raced. But like
Right?
obviously
But if the
we
cost
can't.
is down, and you could,
Yeah.
If it was just
you said
after
5
hours.
sets of tires, right? 5 sets of tires. So I mean,
For this weekend,
for this
we
weekend,
could cut
right
that
now.
down easily, and that's on the low end at 5 sets. You could easily do that format with 4 sets of tires properly.
Yeah,
That now
2 practices,
who's getting
quality
6,
main.
7 sets? Now we're cutting that price in half, and then the teams are actually able to afford it more. Like
Even wear and tear on the engine program. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
dude,
the
this whole,
engines.
Think about
Then we
that.
could do
Like,
it
it's
on
a
one
big
engine.
thing.
One
Yeah.
engine.
testing when the weekend before went Thursday, the Friday, right? Like, dude, you're talking that's a rebuild every weekend if you want to test that much.
Easily.
And I'm having to do 2 classes this weekend because it's a big advantage to run 2 classes. You can talk about taking that out if it's a pro thing
yeah,
and it
cut
has
that
limited.
whole deal out.
If you have limited track time, then now you have to say you can only run. If you want to be in the
Mhm.
pro, you can only do that because we're making it more difficult for you guys. You can't just take the easy way out
Yeah.
and do double duty and get all the track time.
Because the Supernats this year is going to sell out in K and X30 fast as hell because there's going to be a ton
Double
of
dippers.
X30 guys double dipping after last year. Thomas Stolzer-Monis wins KA, finishes second. Oliver Hodgson runs up front, and X30 the whole week also runs KA. 2 guys just set the bar,
Yeah,
and
you
now
gotta
it's
be able to,
Supernats
you gotta
this
be
year.
able to limit that, but again, they haven't been able to. Like, what's stopping us from doing that?
Nothing
right?
is, right? Some series has got to – it's a leap of faith on a lot of ends to turn down a little bit of short-term money on a long-term play. And I think if you're smart enough, you could make it where it's an investment plan of however you do it with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just the simple fact of having some kind of charter system where teams are invested and your grid's guaranteed for the year, I think you're able to structure around it and your revenue's going to end out around the same. Because so many of these guys, the numbers are up and down. X30 Junior was 13 in Utah.
Yeah.
I mean, at least now those guys got to freaking go.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Bryce, to your point, right? Like, the one difference here is, again, like, we can't do a million classes. 2 would be the absolute max on this format. There's no way you can do more than 2. It would disrupt, I think, too much of the weekend to do more than 2. And
Well, there's only 2 pro classes.
at the end of the day, there's only 2. K is not. It shouldn't be. K should be showcase. K should be top of the amateur pyramid.
Yeah, it should. It's
And
like
it-
the lights division. I
It
guess,
should
if
be
you
go
wanna compare it.
perform in that and have those guys be the last ones in the lineup so they run right before the pros go on track in
That's
the regular
no-
format.
Yeah, and that's no discredit.
Not
any of
to
those
knock on
drivers.
those guys
Right.
at all,
Mhm.
right?
No, but right now
what
we
it
have
should be.
a separation problem. Like, we're not separating enough.
No, we
There's-
aren't because there's too many top guys going in, and then the guys behind feel like they got to spend top guy money to go run with them.
Right.
I mean, the fact that guys
And
are
it's
running,
true.
yeah,
I mean,
and
it
they
is.
do because they've got to play catch up.
Yeah.
Should clear that out a little bit, and then now it becomes a showcase class. Now you can hopefully still spend a little less than where you're at in KA to go win in KA and race against less guys, and now you're on the radar
I
for a
do
charter.
think overall, though, this year, like if we're looking at the PKS schedule or the results from Houston, let's use an example. I think the field in X30 was proper, like all
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Stout.
insanely
Stout.
good. And the KA field, like when I ran KA last year, they were the top 10. Like, dude, if you were just a KA guy from, let's just
Oh,
say you were a
dude.
regional guy and you came to that field, like, I'm sorry, you were finishing 11th.
Yeah.
Like, you just weren't
Didn't
going to
work.
beat the caliber of drivers that were in it. And now there's maybe 5 of them, right? So I do feel like the shift kind of has come back, and I think there's reasons behind that why people were, I guess, intimidated by X30 for a long time. But now that it seems like
We can say it. They didn't feel like they had power.
I mean, sure, we can say that. I mean, the RPG had a leg up on everybody, and people kind of didn't want to play. But now this year, I mean, you got, dude, the X30 field's insane this year.
Oh, my God.
So
it's so much more
X30's back.
attractive.
and
to
I'm
go.
excited about it. Like last year with Braden, we would show up to Supernats, and I'm like, yeah, as excited as I am, like we can bust out a top 5 for sure. But like now we're coming into this weekend, we're going, dude, we have a great shot at winning. You know what I mean? And a lot of people feel that way.
yeah.
So I think that whatever it is that has brought that field closer together now, I think the pro level racing, I think it's just going to continue to keep growing. The OKN platform for the Stars Championship is every weekend is growing. People are getting more excited about it, even with it being so new around the world still. So I think like the pro level single speed stuff is it really pro racing in general now is slowly coming back. The shifter numbers are getting better. The X30 numbers are getting better. And I think just to capitalize on that and maximize those and realistically streamline those classes is going to come down to the job you can do marketing and how as an industry we're able to capitalize on that.
I don't want to burst our own bubble, but I saw a story today that Turney's running KA, and I wanted to go check the list before I said it.
Turney already told me he was.
Yeah. Let me see. No. Oh, no, he's not. Never mind. Jordan Perry's entered. We're good.
Turney said that he wanted to run KA because it was action-packed.
I mean, look, everybody wants to have fun at the go-kart track and race too much. That's why we got to be held from ourselves, though.
See,
half the reason guys run too is it's not just a strategy deal to get double seat time. It's because they're like, oh, that looks like fun, right? And
no, it's still. I mean, it's cool to race in. Like,
don't get it, but listen up, Joe. You're getting to race at a high level of racing with too much money behind you every single weekend. It's unfair.
Turney's
You shouldn't
too
be
nice.
allowed to go.
I think it'd get bullied in KA, to be honest.
Maybe.
Dude, K
Maybe.
K could be a
Come on
dumpster
now.
fire.
But
You gotta-
the
it's
thing
levels
the
out.
thing with it though is that the class shouldn't have to go head to head
No.
with a guy that's racing at an international or national level every single week.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
That's
I agree.
unfair. It's an unfair advantage for the KA guy. Of what that class is supposed to be is the regional guy that isn't at the competition level and doesn't have the money yet, in one way or another, to get to X30. And then too, if you want to throw money at them, the KA guys want money all the time. It should be a Road to Indy scholarship style fund.
There you go.
You shop around at the end of the year. I've got $10,000 cash.
Yeah.
Chase, what kind of offer can you make me? I'm a badass. I just won the championship.
Exactly.
Give me chassis. Give me tent. Give me something. A little bit of help. And let me get onto that charter seat. And I've got this amount of money and tires and entry and whatever, or just flat out cash to put towards an engine program, and spend it off the credit card of the series promoter. Whatever. Make sure that they don't walk away with a $10,000 check. Then you can do barter deals, right? If the series owner is the guy importing the tires or the motors, it doesn't have to be $10,000 even for him out of his pocket. But, anyway, I think good ends on all of it. I think with where we're at right now, obviously, I think we're doing a great job. I think everyone else is doing a great job. I think it's cool that we've got younger team owners in the sport that are forward-thinking. I think that part's ripe. I think the last piece that we've been waiting on is probably going to happen in 2024, and that's having so many national races that are so similar that I feel like, ripe for something. And talking earlier today, I was a little bit timid. If someone does something like this, I'd be super excited again. Because earlier today, I'm like, I think it's going to be a slow burn. So everyone's going to trickle down. And what was a 275 weekend this year might be a 240 weekend next year. We're going to slowly drain the market out. But if someone does something exciting and something brand new and really sticks out again, like this series did when it first started with purse money at the beginning and less classes in 2013, or when SCUSA started, or again, Stars has been new, so there's been some innovation, right? Don't get me wrong. With OKN this year, with the light system, doing a video system, doing a lot of different new stuff. But if someone really sets the bar and goes absolutely bonkers next year, could go freaking wrong. We could all be idiots in this room, but I would like to think that we're not. And if someone does that, this 16-race national schedule that we promote now, it could very quickly go down to 4 pro level and 12 amateur national Loretta Lynn races.
Yeah, just give us a reason to choose you. You know what I mean? Like we can't go to them all. At least our team can. Some teams can, but we do not go to them all. And
Listen,
we won't.
I'll say one thing on what you just said, Xander, is exciting factor that happened this year. Chris Kardashian, Route 66. Want to elaborate on it?
Hell yeah.
A lot of ideas he took from people. very relaxed weekend. Made it a different format than anyone's ever heard of, and it was great.
And we got to go to the Indy 500 for free, dude.
That's great too. But change the format. It was great. I can elaborate on it if you want me to. But he changed it, and every single person in the tent, and every person that I talked to loved it. But that was just a
the
different
2-tire
change, and we
limit,
loved it.
the little extra
cornhole
quality
tournament,
session
yes,
stuff,
the
the
cool
cornhole, the
prizes.
inflatable,
Everybody
the cool
bought
prizes.
into it, and
Oh, I mean, that's exactly what a regional deal should be. I mean, he did that
100%.
100% right. You got the right guy, and the biggest thing that I think to end on, too, for me is, like, you got a non-promoter just jumping in. Fresh set of eyes, right? And we're lacking on that in some regards. I consider myself a little bit of an outsider by not being a kid that was in karting since I was 5. And never fully getting entrenched in it. I mean, as close as my mindset's able to be on the microphone and the broadcast, I'm still not the same as an outlook on this sport as Braden. I race 3 times a year. I announced most of them. I was isolated a little bit. And I listened to a lot of different people and got different experiences by talking to the whole paddock, whereas you're in your bubble. But regardless, you've got an outside promoter that wasn't a guy in it, that was a dad most recently, where it's fresh on his mind of, damn, this was expensive. Damn, this wasn't fun enough. This isn't what it should be. This is what it should be from the customer side. And again, we look at the growth of F1, attribute it to anything of the fluke of the pandemic and the Netflix stuff if you want. You have an outside of motorsports entity that bought a motorsports racing series, and it shot through the roof compared to the legacy families that have owned IndyCar and NASCAR. There's a reason for that. That's a totally different mindset. And so if someone is willing to listen to the right people with a different mindset, you could still be a legacy owner and succeed. But
listen more than you speak, my friend.
yes, sir. With all that, thank you everyone for tuning in. A longer episode. Trevor's going to kill us. We'll make it back up to him with maybe some cider or something. He's not a beer guy. But we'll chat again next week. We'll also be having some more coverage, obviously, this weekend for the U.S. Pro Kart Series. You can root Braden on. We're on an X30, and KA, he's actually breaking our rules. He's double dipping. So as much as we complain about double dipping, you suck. But him, the MPG boys here with Race and Chase, is always fun to have you guys on. And we hope you guys enjoy the show. Saturday's fully free. Sunday, KC Premium members. We'll have content coming out Thursday and Friday. And as we talk about series promoters, heard an inkling from Mark Coates today. I'm going to put it on him and put it out. He said Friday night he's down to get on the microphone in front of a camera, and I cannot believe it.
There you
Well,
go.
big man Mark Coates says, unlike Orlando, when he said he would do it and he flaked, so he might flake again. Might be flake number 2,
I'll call him.
but he said he's going to do it. So we're going to
Is
see
he
if
gonna
we get
do
him
one
on
of
this
the
couch right here.
conversations for Marky, Mark Coates?
I'm
Mark
not, he,
conversation?
I mean, look, man, we're doing our own thing. I don't want to get into that. I love Ortberger and Tom, but no, a little bit different. I guess I don't know. Might be a one-on-one. I haven't even decided yet because I haven't planned anything out because I don't think Mark's going to come.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Mark's supposed to come.
Well, now Mark
said he's
has to
coming.
come because it's been put out on the internet.
I did that in Orlando and he still didn't show up. He was on the cover. And then we went back for commercial and it wasn't Mark. It was Blake. What a downgrade. Love you, Blake. Thanks for watching, guys.